The guy was stroking the cat. He called him Nick. He shared with the animal that his life is boring and full of nonsense, but at last he saw the light in the future. With his magic and exchange skills, he can get anything. He will show himself. A huge paw appeared behind him. He grabbed the cat and held it in his arms, screaming furiously. In this other world, he will show what he is capable of. At another time, there was a wagon with people in the middle of the forest. One horse was pulling a cart and 2 passengers. They were surrounded by other people on horseback, and there were also those on foot. One girl shuddered. The other one called her name. It turned out that her name was Karina. She took off her hood and muttered that it was weird. The grandfather who raised him died after the death of his parents. Now he's alone for life. That's exactly what he thinks. The funeral and other memorial procedures were completed 2 hours ago. The guy was looking at his phone, lying on the bed, and said that he was surprised that 10 days had passed since his death. He was looking at the notifications of the selection results. It says that the Human Resources Department of Kawakato thanked him for choosing their company. As a result of careful selection, unfortunately, they will not be able to hire him. After reading this message, the guy threw the phone and continued to stare at the ceiling. He recalled how people told him that if they did not return the scholarship, he would find a job. They are grateful for the money, otherwise they would not have been able to go to university. He was advised to look for a normal job, rather than follow dreams that he did not have. Everyone was talking about the future, but they were living their dreams. He believed that working in a good company would please his grandfather, but the atmosphere in the room remained oppressive. Suddenly, a cat jumped on the guy. He started caressing him, saying that he was the only one he had. Despite his mood, there is nowhere to go. After lunch, he has to go look for a job. He remembered the box that lay on his bed. When he opened it, he noticed that there were 3 old rings lying there. He examined them carefully, picking them up. Finally, he decided to try one of them on himself, and it fit perfectly. The cat snatched one of the rings out of the box with his teeth. The guy shouted at Nick not to touch them. They accidentally connected their rings, one that was on the guy's finger and the other that was in the cat's mouth. And suddenly there was a bright light. At that moment, the guy had already opened his eyes from the blinding light and saw that they were on some kind of mountain peak. The guy didn't understand what was going on. Was it really a dream? He looked around but saw only huge mountains and fields. He didn't understand where he was or how he got here. The cat came up to him and he grabbed him in his arms, hugging him tightly. He was lying on the bed and wanted to eat. How did he get here? What did he do? Suddenly, he noticed an ornament that was missing and decided that it was definitely because of the rings. But the rings did not transfer with them either on the guy's finger or on the cat's. But he definitely remembers that she put it on her finger. I couldn't just lose it like that. Is there a connection between the rings and the fact that he was here? Maybe that's why he's here. It's not like manga or anime. Was it really another world? The guy heard something from the side. He also noticed that he was barefoot. Since he turned out to be in another world, he must have a cheat ability. He prayed to God that it would be so. He shouted at the whole neighborhood, trying to open the statistics, but opened his eyes, realized that there was nothing in front of him. He's obviously stuck here. The cat came up to him and started licking his face. The guy turned to him, saying that he didn't care at all, and noticed that his cat was floating in the air. He fell to the ground in fright, his eyes bulging. He screamed and asked the cat how he learned to fly. Did he really get the cheat ability? But the cat landed on his head. The guy lay down comfortably on the field, saying that everything was bad and he obviously couldn't survive here. He thought about it. Nick has a cheat ability, but that's not all. We need to understand what else he can do. A window appeared in front of him, like in video games. It turned out to be Nick's statistics table, but it hadn't appeared before. But the table was written in the name of Daichi Asakura. He had the magic of a homeless man and a special skill of sharing and evaluation. It turned out to be his stats after all. He also has a cheat ability, but he doesn't understand what the exchange is. The assessment is satisfied, classic cheating ability. The cat continued to hover around him, and he decided to test his assessment abilities on a cat. It turned out that the cat possesses the spiritual magic of earth, water, fire, and wind. The guy realized that his cat was cooler than him. The cheating ability became his salary. Even if he returns to Japan, he will be lonely for the rest of his life. Then it would be necessary to make an effort and survive in this world. First, he needs to find out what the assessment is capable of. Wandering through the field, he came across the beginning of the forest. Placing his palm against one of the tree trunks, he decided to apply his skill. He was given information that the width of the leaf is 1.5 centimeters, the length of the branch is 8 m, a lot of leaves, and a height of 40 m. As he thought the assessment worked well, the window lit up in front of him again. He pressed the button and the tree disappeared. The guy hit himself sharply on the head. He didn't understand what was going on. What an exchange ability. At that moment, his cat went berserk and the guy had to let him go. He was apologizing to the animal. He looked at the cat and asked him to sit aside. He decided to use his ability on one of the trees, and that instantly evaporated. The cat came up to the hole that was left after the tree and began to sniff. The guy asked if he was surprised and told him to look at the table. He used his magic again and a tree reappeared in place of the pit. The cat jumped aside. The cat hissed in fright and the guy begged for forgiveness, telling him not to get angry. It's time for him to seriously test his abilities. The tree he had saved remained in his inventory and he was able to exchange it for points. He thought about the fact that he needed to buy shoes. He looked, and such a purchase was possible in the system. And just after the sale of the tree, he had enough money for this purchase, and he managed to exchange his glasses for new sneakers. The exchangeability turned out to be very cool. Now he will definitely be able to survive and even get rich. The future is getting brighter for him, and his motivation has increased. He began to collect everything he sees in his inventory right and left. A big tree and a big stone. The list of things he kept was huge. With what he got, he decided to buy a chainsaw. It was an expensive thing, but that's not the limit. He decided to take her, so far only for verification. He's hungry anyway. Suddenly his cat looked the other way and started hissing. The guy asked him what was the matter. There were noises coming from somewhere in the forest. A huge black tiger was coming straight at them. The guy thought that he was a cutie. The beast growled and he fell to the ground with his 5th point. The guy tried to use his storage ability on the animals, but it didn't work out. He couldn't take birds or insects when he put the trees in the internal storage. He does not know how everything works, but apart from plants, it does not accept other living objects. He has nothing, there are no weapons. He needs to at least scare off the tiger. He thought about the fact that he needed to strike first, to kill without giving a chance to fight back. He said to himself that he needed to be calm. He's still in the distance. So far, everything is fine. You need to keep your distance. He needs at least 100 meters to open the vault in time. It was not in vain that he tested his abilities. His cat continued to hiss as the tiger advanced on them. The guy told him not to worry, that everything would be fine. After waiting for the beast to get as close to them as possible, the guy used his storage, and a huge pit appeared under the tiger, where the beast fell. He continued to use his abilities, and a huge marine container with liquid nitrogen appeared in the pit. The tiger began to fall into it, trying to grab the walls of the container with its claws. The guy finally decided that he had succeeded and asked the cat how he liked his idea. It was easy in his opinion. But abruptly his cat looked away again. Someone got out of the pit right away, and it was a tiger that was still alive. The guy panicked. He clearly needed a weapon. At that moment his cat used his powers against the beast. They were water bullets, Nick's spiritual magic. They looked more like armor-piercing shells. But the tiger had nothing to do with it. He continued to advance on them. The guy got into his inventory looking for something there that would help them. He decided to build a wall. He waited again until the tiger got close enough and used his strength. He clearly has nowhere to run, but he is ready for the tiger to attack, but that will be the end. The tiger had quite strange movements. The guy thought there was something wrong with him. This was his last chance. And at that moment, right from the inventory, he took out a stone that fell on the animal. Now that was the end. Just in case, he tried to save the defeated one to the inventory, and he succeeded. He wanted to eat. To begin with, he set traps, bought food, weapons, and tools. I bought myself a drone through which I looked at what was happening. He noticed through the camera on it an expedition with a lot of people. He decided that the sharing ability was too cheesy even for him. He stroked his cat, who was eating food, telling him that it was time for the first contact. A little later, 2 people from the expedition were riding horses in a field. One of them noticed a guy with a cat sitting on a rock in front. He greeted them. They asked him if he was traveling alone, and he replied that they were traveling with their animals. The girl was surprised when she saw the cat. He asked if they saw them so rarely. She replied that quite often, but never with such a long coat. He introduced himself as a Sakura Daichi and said the name of his cat. The girl took off her hood, saying that my name was Alicia Heartland. The guy, seeing the beauty in front of him, was embarrassed, but I thought sharply to myself that she looked like a schoolgirl. The second girl on the horse looked at me strangely. The guy said that if she wanted to pet him, she could do it. She wanted to reach out to him when her partner put the sword between them. She told Alicia to move away and she apologized. The girl with the sword looked at the guy and asked if he was really alone here. He replied that this was indeed how he called himself, a merchant. He said that he left the village and became a novice trader. It was such a legend that he came up with about himself. He started showing all his goods that he had collected. There are quite a lot of things there for a small bag. He has a lot of useful items, for example, a flashlight. The girls stared at him in amazement. They haven't seen this before. The girl with the sword asked if he had taken this magic item out of the vault, but the second noticed that this was not the case. She didn't feel any magic from this luminous instrument. The guy thought that since they were talking about it, there was still a storage room and magic tools. So statistics were magic. He put the lantern on the ground, pushing it so that it rolled towards them and said they could take it. One of the girls took it and dedicated her face to herself, saying that it was definitely not a magic tool. The second one couldn't believe it. He asked if they were traveling together, but the girl with the ball said that she was accompanying the second one. The guy was scared, but he said that if they didn't mind, he would like to go with them to the nearest town or village, and asked if he could find out the name of the second girl. The first one looked pretty cute. She said that it was unlikely that a bad person would ask them to do this, but the defense attorney said he was suspicious enough. The guy replied that if she was worried, he could easily put away his weapon. But there's no point in putting away weapons that can't be used. Judging by his hands, he doesn't know how to use a bow or a knife. The good-natured guy laughed, saying that she had figured him out. The girl was confused. She agreed to escort him to the main merchant. The guy was happy about it. He thanked the beautiful girls for their help. At that moment, the cat jumped out of his arms right into Alicia's arms. She was stroking the cat admiringly, talking about how cute he was. The guy was still standing with his hand outstretched for a handshake, but he was clearly ignored. Then he turned to the guard standing behind him, still with his hand outstretched, and thanked her for her help. She said that she would take him to the main merchant, but she asked me not to come closer than 1 meter to her. She can't let the magician get that close to them. He asked what kind of magician she was referring to. She told him not to pretend that he was traveling alone without combat skills. Then he understood what she meant. She reminded him that he needed to go with them but keep his distance. The guy noted that her sword was long enough, and she told him that he had changed his tone. The guy asked without hesitation what was wrong with that. They were the same age after all. She told him she talks about how she wants to, just not to do anything that would make her attack him. He asked if he was really that suspicious, and she replied that he was. Behind them, the girl continued to walk, whose horse was chewing on her cloak, but she was only paying attention to the flashlight in her hand. The guy turned his head and saw an expedition with a lot of people. One of the carriages stopped, and an older man got out. He asked if he was the one who was escorted to the city of Harem. The guy, putting his hand on his chest and slightly lowering his head, called his name. The man responded in kind, saying his name was Klaus Bertram. He is in charge of this caravan and is the head of the Bertram company. The guy doesn't know how much influence he has, so he needs to be polite. He said that he was not yet experienced in these matters. Then the man asked him what he could offer in return. The guy handed over a bag with unknown contents and said he could sell it to him. The man looked at his assistant from behind, hinting at him, and he approached the guy. I take the bag from his hands, handing it to the owner. Upon opening it, the man was surprised. He turned to the guy, telling him that he was very generous or did not know the real price. The guy replied that he probably didn't know how much it was worth, this country. The man thought about the whole situation. The guy replied that the cost of the goods may vary depending on the place and time. Although it is grown in his country, it is still a rare and valuable commodity. The men replied to him he is quite honest. The guy replied that he was also a merchant. Lying won't brighten it up. The man agreed with him. Everything was going as the guy had planned. He thanked the man, saying that his grandfather had taught him this. The man in response also decided to tell him honestly that in this country this product is very valuable and probably costs more than in his homeland. He asked how much pepper was in the bag. No country on the continent has succeeded in growing pepper seeds. It all depends on the import, and only aristocrats and wealthy people can use it. Since his product is not from another country but from another continent, but he didn't have a permit, the man looked at the guy strangely and he flinched. He realized that they now know that he is not a local. He said that he immediately thought that his appearance was unusual, so he came from another continent. The guy could only agree with this, but then they may have problems. The guy thanked me for the warning. The merchant said that they needed to discuss the price of pepper anyway, but the guy asked to wait. He asked if he wanted to buy something else. He was thinking of becoming a merchant in this country, but as the man said, he is not native, knowledge is necessary to live here. So could he help him? The man said that he was honest, but the guy just wants to see the good in people. The man just laughed at that. He can't help him become a merchant just like that. In this case, the guy asked how much pepper he wanted in return, and the man showed the number on his fingers. The guy thought that it was stupid to hope that he would help just like that. He took out 5 bags of pepper from his backpack. The merchant said that it was not bad. They should treat their trading partner with respect. His grandfather taught him that, but he actually read about it in a book. Klaus told his servant Lloyd to take the pepper. Then he turned to Karina. He told her to continue to accompany Alicia and take Mr. Asakura to Karam City. I asked Alicia if she was okay with it. She was only in favor. The men headed towards the carriage. The guy held out his hand for a handshake and thanked the girls for their help. They bowed. Karina said she would accompany him and the other said she would also be with them. The girls headed forward, ignoring the guy's outstretched hand. He asked where they were going. The answer was to go to Karina's boss. Alicia will tell him everything later. The guy asked me to call him Daichi. He doesn't need formality. He wants to be treated like a friend. The embarrassed girl wanted to say that how could she, but the guy handed her the cat right in front of her nose and said that it was his partner Nick. The cat, as if agreeing, meowed. The girl's heart melted again. The guy and the cat exchanged glances and said that he was letting go of his paws. The cat began to fall. The girl immediately grabbed him, starting to stroke him. The guy approached her saying that she was hugging Nick. And his name is Daichi, and he smiled. The girl was embarrassed. He walked behind her with a satisfied face, asking her if she would go, holding him in her arms, and she agreed. He came even closer, saying that he couldn't hear her, clearly teasing her. And she screamed again, using the word master. The guy made a sad face and she finally called him by his first name without formalities. It amused him a lot, but the cat clearly didn't like something. At this time, in another part of the camp, tents and tents were pitched everywhere. A merchant was sitting at the table. He asked Lloyd what he thought of the new guy. He replied that he spoke their language too well for a visitor. He nods and speaks politely. His hands are clean, which means he has never worked because he grew up in a well-off family and has a good education. Klaus noticed it too. He asked about the other one, meaning Pepper. The servant said that most likely he gave it as a thank you. He's the son of a rich man or the stupidest son of an aristocrat. Bertram noted that he could become a big shot in the future. He has storage since the product is so well preserved. Beautiful and delicious pepper on the table. Perhaps it was so. Storage is a rare skill bestowed by God. The owner can put objects there and they will be stored for a long time. The capacity depends on the magical power of the owner. Time stops inside. And a magic bag is a storage in the form of a bag or bag in which you can also put objects. The internal storage capacity can be increased, but the capacity is limited, and time does not stop. He thinks about what he pretended to pull out of the magic bag and was able to swim across the sea. With storage, he's still young. We need to find out if there are any valuable items in the vault. First of all, they need to learn about this unknown country. The servant then asked if they would stop being courteous to him, but was told that there was no need. But he needs to warn employees and attendants to be polite to him. The guy noticed how two men were sitting at the tent. One of them showed a box inside which was an expensive glass, presented in the form of a glass with interesting patterns. The hero was surprised that in this world a glass goblet is an expensive item, although the quality of the glass is at an average level. Someone from the outside called Karina, calling her sister. It was a girl with short hair and a scarf on her head. She was sitting by the cauldron and asked for help to light the fire. Karina apologized. They say she needs to see someone off. The guy thought about it. Why did they ask Karina if she was doing it with magic? He would like to see it. He talked about it later and said it out loud that he would like to see her make a fire. She agreed if that's what he wants. The girl who asked for help thanked Karina. She asked if it was too difficult for her to make a fire with flint, wasn't it? She raised her hand, placing her palm near the logs, and instantly lit a fire. It was the spiritual magic of fire. The firewood immediately caught fire when she raised her hand. Nick's attacking magic was also impressive, but it's amazing how magic is used in everyday life. The guy asked her if she always helps to make a fire. It turned out that she only does this when she's not busy. She went on between the same cauldrons with stoves and lit a fire in each of them. So those who can't control fire magic get it with flint. Alicia said that in this case, magical artifacts are used. He asked if there was magic power, if it was possible to use magic artifacts. It turned out not to be. The profession he can get depends on magic. The stronger the magic, the more worthy the profession. People who don't have magic can only use artifacts. They both manage to earn a living. The guy remembered his past. He asked the girls if the quality of life depends on magic. Karina called Mr. Asakura. He shuddered and turned his attention to the girl who had asked for help a few minutes earlier. Her face was crestfallen. His eyes widened. He realized that he had said too much and covered his mouth with his palm and cursed. He apologized to the girl. She said that everything was fine, she's already used to it. Yes, she doesn't have magical powers, but she works in good company. Everyone here is kind and helps each other. She was lucky, but she said it with sadness. Thanks to his cheating ability, he was able to become a merchant, but it turned out to be a bad and selfish idea. With this ability, he can help people who don't have magic. He looked at his hands, thinking about it. It will be interesting to shake the foundations of this world. People without magic can live the same way as people with magic using artifacts. If he spreads their knowledge, people without magic will treat him well. It's just his imagination. But there is plenty of motivation. He called Corette and handed her a lighter, saying that she could take this artifact to light a fire. At the same moment, he demonstrated how it works by pressing the lighter button, which everyone is used to in his world. Everyone was discouraged. Karina said he was so small. This is the first time she has seen such a magical artifact, but their other traveling companion noticed that he didn't look like him. It's transparent, like a gemstone. The guy said it was a lighter and handed it to Corette, telling her to try it. She began to twitch her hands and say that she could not accept such an expensive thing. At that moment, the guy opened his hand with the lighter and it fell to the ground. Everyone looked at it in shock. He said she was surprisingly strong. If he breaks even 2 pieces, he won't be angry. He told her not to worry and to try and thrust the object into the girl's hands. She turned on the lighter and held it to the dry leaves. They were instantly engulfed in flames and she threw them into the oven. The logs were singed. She looked at the object with admiration, asking if such an incredible artifact really exists. His homeland must be very good. The hero said that he wants people in this country without magic to be able to use magical artifacts. The girl asked if he was a foreign trader. With such wonderful tools, he will definitely succeed, in her opinion. She held out the lighter in her hands, thanks to him, but he said he wouldn't take it and she could keep the lighter for herself. She was surprised. He told his teammates to go and join them. The girl asked him to wait. She said she couldn't accept such a thing. She tried to stop him by grabbing his clothes. He kept trying to tell her that she wasn't that expensive. Suddenly, someone interrupted them by calling Karina. The man asked what she was doing here. He was a tall man with scars on his face and wearing a knight's chain mail. Karina called him her boss and said she was just on her way to see him. The hero thought to himself that he was huge. Karina introduced him as Captain Jeffrey. She also introduced the main character, calling him Bertram's business partner. Daichi held out his hand for a handshake, saying that he would go with them to the next city. Jeffrey said he was responsible for the security and escort of Bertram's company. Karina said that the head said to keep an eye on this gentleman. The captain retaliated by telling her to accompany these 2 people. She gave her consent. The hero thought to himself, is she really a security guard? Did she really need an escort again? The captain called Mr. Asakura, telling him to go with him. He asked if he wanted a drink, but the guy refused. The girl, who was given a new object for her, stood with a lighter in her hand, looking at the people leaving in surprise. They had a hearty lunch, and the hero was already comfortably lying down on a mattress in the tent, and his cat was lying on his stomach. The guy was thinking that others were so surprised by the plastic of the lighter. They even compared it to a gemstone. He wondered if he had overdone it. At that moment, someone called Mr. Asakura from the street, asking if he was awake. It was Karina. He replied that it was. She apologized for coming so late, but the head of the company wants to talk to him. The guy replied that he would be right there. He wonders if his watch looks too suspicious. He decided to hide them for now. He was putting on his jacket and wondering if there were any problems. They were walking between the tents. There were a lot of people around. The drinking men were looking at him. He was surprised by the attention from the outside. They came to a large tent, and Karina said they needed to come here. The guy pushed aside the cloth that served as an entrance and asked for forgiveness. Inside was the head of the merchants and one of the girls who accompanied him today. The man pushed back his chair, told the guy to sit down. They all sat down at the table, and the man apologized for calling him so late in the evening. The hero was wondering if something had happened. If something is wrong, he can exchange the goods. The merchant said that this was not the case and the goods he gave were excellent. Then the guy asked what was the matter. The man put a bundle of cloth on the table, inside of which there was something. The merchant wanted to talk about the lighter. The guy remembered that he gave it today, Corette. The merchant held out his palm, asking not to misunderstand him. He didn't take her away. The girl wanted to consult about a lighter, a magical artifact that she had never seen before. A man with a serious face was telling him that he did not understand the true value. The guy was surprised. Of course, he was thinking of selling it, but as an artifact for household chores. The man told him that it was an artifact that could be used by aristocrats and rich people. He told the guy that it might not cost anything in his country, but it was extremely expensive in this one. The hero asked if it was considered a simple artifact, to which the man shook his head negatively. It can be used by people without magic. Therefore, it is more valuable than an ordinary magic tool. But the problem is in its body. It can be sold for the price of glass or even jewelry. At that moment, the guy remembered passing by 2 men who were discussing expensive glass. When such items hit the market, there will definitely be those who will try to sell them to aristocrats and rich people. The guy thought about it. If that happens, he may have problems. He hadn't thought of that. The merchant said that he promised to help him, but the question is what he will do now. He thinks that he didn't want to do anything, but it's useless for him to talk about it. It turns out that he will not be able to shake the charter of this world. He recalled the glass goblet again, saying that in fact, he had already tried to sell this item to aristocrats and rich people. He took out a glass rose on a stand from somewhere. Alicia, who was sitting next to her, shouted admiringly how beautiful she was. The merchant was also surprised. The guy, seeing their reaction, thought he had overdone it. The merchant shouted to someone to stop and take his time. The girl also screamed in the same way. This is the moment. The main character already had someone's sword at his neck. Karina was standing next to him, pointing it at the guy. The merchant quickly tried to calm her down, saying that they had no problems and he was just surprised. Karina took the sword away from the guy, putting it back in the scabbard. She bowed her head, asking for forgiveness. The merchant exhaled, closed his eyes, and asked Mr. Asakura for forgiveness. It's his fault that he raised his voice. At that moment, the hero remembered that Karina had asked not to come closer to her than 1 m. He thought, what else for a meter? They were in a tent. The man noticed that the guy did not even move, although the sword was pointed at him. He replied that he knew she wouldn't hurt him, or maybe he just didn't understand what had happened and therefore didn't even make a sound, which was probably true. The merchant suggested that if they all calmed down, then they could continue the conversation. The hero said that Karina was not to blame, so everything is fine. The merchant asked Karina to move away so as not to embarrass the guests, and she agreed. The guy continued talking about the glass sculpture. She is so beautiful that any jewel is inferior to her. The merchant wondered if this was the same glass that he usually sees. She looked just fine and beautiful. The guy reached into his backpack and took out many more glass sculptures and lighters that they had seen earlier. The merchant noticed that they even glow differently. He knows that her body is different from the glass they work with, but some will try to sell it at a high price. He would like to solve the money issue. He wants to make money on glass objects. He can make a lighter a bonus to them. First of all, the buyer who buys these expensive glass objects will give a lighter for free as an artifact for use in everyday life. And then he will distribute them among aristocrats and rich people. The merchant asked if he wanted to distribute lighters in the market. It's hardly a good idea, but there's no other way out. They will follow his plan. The guy asked with a satisfied smile if he still agreed to cooperate with him. The merchant agreed. The guy pulled his hand out, thanking him, and they sealed their words with a handshake, so that was the first step. When they walked out of the tent, Karina bowed down in front of the guy, asking for forgiveness for that act. The second girl said that Karina had done nothing wrong. She too, like the main one, was surprised and screamed. Daichi replied that it was because of him. He was surprised, but she was just doing her job. He should be the one apologizing. The girls looked very upset about the situation. The guy noticed this and thought about it. He called Alicia and handed her the cat. She melted instantly. He knew it would work. It was quite funny. He said he liked it better when she smiled. The girl melted and finally smiled. The guy noticed that she was shy too, quite cute, which confused her even more. Karina looked at it with an impenetrable face. The guy wondered why everyone was looking at him. It turns out that everyone found out that he gave Corette a lighter. The guy scratched his head and asked if others also wanted such a thing. Karina replied that perhaps they wanted to understand what kind of person he was and talk to him. Maybe they think he's not only a traitor, a stranger, but also a hero. Maybe he was following a woman who was loved by a foreign aristocrat hiding his identity. Maybe he was exiled here because he was secretly born into the royal family. The guy scratched his chin with a thoughtful face and said that she had a pretty good imagination. Karina replied that these were their thoughts, not hers. The third replied that it was generally quite good for everyone here. They noticed that some screams were heard closer to the forest. Men were running away from there, begging for help. They were being chased by monsters. All three of them looked at it with wide eyes. One of the men shouted that they were royal monkeys. A whole flock of them is coming here. Karina instantly grabbed her sword, telling her companions to hide behind her. There were a large number of monsters coming out of the forest in front of them. The warriors immediately started fighting the monsters. They tried to surround them. From somewhere on the side, a projectile flew into the head of one of the monsters. Arrows and spears were fired at them, setting them on fire. The guy who was watching from the sidelines asked if everything was okay with them. Karina replied that yes, they could win. She turned back to see what was happening on the battlefield. Someone suddenly shouted that the monsters had reinforcements from the south of the forest. 10 more individuals appeared. The commander-in-chief tried to cheer up his warriors, saying that they were stronger than them and needed to attack. The main character thought about it. He scratched his chin and thought that he could just look, but he could also help. But is it worth it? He looked at his cat, which was hiding under his clothes. He doesn't want to show them all his strength. He poked Nick's forehead with his finger, telling him to hide and not use magic. The guy opened his vault and thought about what to choose from the weapons. Karina said it was very strange. The royal monkeys are too active today. She told Alice to find out if they were hiding in the south of the forest. Daichi stood apart from them and watched what was happening. At that moment, he noticed that in the distance from the side something was moving in the tall grass. He shouted to Karina to be careful because there are royal monkeys in the east of the field. At that moment, many more individuals ran out of the grass and moved towards them. They were close and fast. He needs a weapon, at least some kind. At that moment, one of the monsters was pulling its claw paw towards him from the side of the guy. But Karina arrived in time and pierced him with a sword. But two of the monsters made their way back to them. They were heading straight for Alicia, who was doing magic. The main character screamed. And at that moment, taking off from his seat, and with such force that pieces of earth flew to the sides, he swung to kick the monster in the head. He was surprised at what he was doing. The monster paid attention to the guy turning to him, and at that moment, a foot flew into his face and the monkey rolled head over heels into the distance. Other people noticed him. One of them, who was stretching her paws towards Alicia, was hit in the forehead and fell into a knockout. The girls who watched this picture were in great shock from what was happening. The guy flew away from the force of the blow. The guy was lying on the ground from a collision with a monster. The girls ran up to him, calling his name. He lifted her off the ground in her face and asked if the girl was okay. She replied with tears in her eyes that yes. They grabbed the guy by the arms, tried to lift him to his feet, and said they had to leave. At that moment, several monkeys reappeared behind them. Daichi and Karina turned to look at them. The girl swung her sword at one of the monsters and the guy kicked again. While they were fighting, a monster appeared behind Alicia. He just stood there and watched. The girl looked back, paying attention to him. At that moment, the monster opened its mouth, approaching her. Seeing this, Daichi took off and stood in front of the girl, trying to stop the monster. She screamed. Karina, who noticed this, also called out to Mr. Asakura. But she was trying to stop one of the monsters right now and couldn't help him. He thought that at this rate the monsters would kill him. He tried to think that everything was fine and didn't hurt, but it really didn't hurt him. He was being bitten by a monster with his fangs, but the guy felt absolutely nothing. He remembered the moment that Alicia could also use magic without improvised means. He just wanted to be sure that she was using physical strength and stealth. He realized that this is magic without improvised means. And that time too, he noticed a strange movement in the forest before they were attacked by a tiger. And when the stone flew into his head, he also felt nothing. Then he will use shamanism. He took out a knife from his bosom and directed magic into it and stabbed the monster. For him, it was conditional, like taking a piece of cake with a fork. It's physical strength and stealth. He looked at Karina, who was still struggling. He shouted at Karina to leave the monkey to him. Using physical force, he attacked the monster from behind, stabbing it in the back. He was using stealth now. The monster did not fall and continued to scream. This knife was too small, so it wouldn't reach his heart. He shouted at Tom not to run away. The knife was only 23 cm long. It was just a remark. He took out a dagger and fell backwards because he lost his balance. The monkey turned to him with an intimidating smile. The guy also smiled, and at that moment Karina's sword pierced the monster's neck. And he fell dead to the ground, splattering everything around with his blood, including the girl. She swung the sword sharply, clearing it of the liquid. The girl with blood on her face sighed. The guy was gently lowered to the ground with the help of magic, but a couple of centimeters from the target they abruptly released him and he hit. The girls screamed and ran towards him. The guy smiled and gave a thumbs-up sign that he was fine. He continued to lie on the ground, asking the girls if they were injured. The cat, who got out from under his jacket, sighed. The ladies running towards him both held out their hands to help him up. Karina told him that she should be the one asking him about it. The second girl has already decided to express her opinion in the same way, saying that it would be better to worry about yourself, not about them. They were already lifting the guy up, and he asked what was on the defensive line at the moment. Karina said that the number of enemies is decreasing. If this continues, they will win. The guy asked if it was worth helping them. Karina sighed heavily. It's her job to protect the two of them. She remembered the moment when the guy was bitten by a monster and thought that she had done her job pretty badly. And she clutched the sword that hung from her belt with her hand. The guy noticed it. The defense could not be held due to a sudden attack from other sides. The fighting spirit of the royal monkeys will soon come to naught. The guy asked if she really thought that. He turned at a sound from behind. And I saw that the monsters began to fear the influx of people and ran back into the forest. Karina smiled, pointing at them with her finger. She wanted to show that her words were confirmed. The guy was smiling contentedly, because after all, without blood on her face, she is even cuter. He turned his attention to his palm when he saw the blood there. He magically transformed a towel into his jacket pocket and took it out. Alicia asked me to give it to her. She magically soaked it, and she began to wipe the guy's face. He shouted that he was cold and he could have done it himself, but she asked to be allowed to do it to her. She was carefully wiping his face. He asked Alicia if she had used spiritual water magic and if she wanted to apologize. He already knows that she can use spiritual water magic. The guy was confused. They have magical artifacts and spiritual magic. The spiritual includes 4 elements. For an artifact, magic power is the key to activation. Magic uses the power of nature. The spiritual depends on the magic of the owner, but the artifacts do not. Spiritual magic can be used many times, and she's stronger. The guy thought about it. It turns out that in this world magic works on 4 elements of the elements, and spiritual magic is stronger than artifacts. The girl asked him how he understood that it was spiritual magic. The guy didn't know what to say to her and decided to say that it was a courtesy. The girl asked him what it meant. He said that in his country, spiritual magic is valued higher than artifacts. Therefore, he made this conclusion, and it would be rude to call it an artifact because they are not so valuable. That's why he said it was spiritual magic. The girls looked at him suspiciously. Karina said that in this country, only 20 people can use spiritual magic, and there are about 100 of them on the whole continent. He thought there weren't many of them. Alicia told him that he should know more about this country before starting his own business. He will be glad if they tell him everything while they are traveling. The guard sighed heavily, saying that there was no other way out. He and the cat thanked them. In gratitude for the help, he will sell 2 statuettes with their faces. But the girls simultaneously replied that they definitely did not need it. The warriors who won the battle shouted joy. It looks like it's already over. The guy asked if they could go there together. Karina replied that perhaps there might be injured people there and he would be able to help. He asked why the royal monkeys had attacked. The guard replied that she had guesses but needed to ask someone and looked at the 2 men sitting on the ground near the guard. He wondered if that meant that spiritual magic was rare. Since Nick used it, he can call it his artifact and the ability to exchange. If someone finds out, there will be problems. It needs to be used carefully. It's not going to be that easy. The girl, lying in bed, recalled the moment when the main character was lying on the ground and asked them if they were all right. He was quite a funny person to her. He was very kind to her, but she had never heard of anyone defeating the royal monkey without any weapons, and he was able to do it on his own. There were moments in her mind when she already thought that everything was lost and the monster was right in front of her. And at that moment, the guy protected her by getting in the way and allowed the monkey to bite him instead of her. Why and why I did it. He was looking at her at that moment and smiling. You can't defeat the royal monkey with one punch, but she remembers well how, as a child, her grandmother told her about the hero. At that moment, she was lying in the tent with Karina on different mattresses. She hid under the blanket, turning from side to side. I'm trying not to think about it. He wasn't afraid of her at all. Even when he realized that she possessed spiritual magic, he did not change his attitude towards her, as other people from her memory did. On the contrary, he was kind and smiling with her. She seems to have completely lost her mind and curled up under the blanket. The next day, everyone was going on the road again. Karina yelled at the guy because he didn't want to ride a horse. The thing was, he had never ridden it. The caravan was moving forward. The girls were sitting in the carriage with the guy. Unaccustomed to it, he was shaking violently. Karina noticed that this was the best carriage they could get. The guy turned away from them, directing his gaze out the window. At that moment, he noticed 2 people near him on a horse, who turned away immediately after he looked at them. He noticed that they were all avoiding his gaze. Karina agreed with him. He doesn't understand how long ago he became so scary. It turned out that last night when he talked about his preferences at breakfast. Although they stopped talking about the lighter, this is not the only reason for misunderstanding. He didn't understand what else was strange. It turned out to be his tent. His tent was different from the others. Karina meant that an unusual light was coming from the tent. The guy said that this is a common thing in his homeland. Karina, who grabbed his head, said that next time, before showing everyone the goods from his homeland, he should warn them. He apologized and said he would remember it. Karina then asked to warn the main merchant too. Another girl asked to show them the goods. She became very interested. Since it's interesting, he can show you his tent. The girl was instantly embarrassed, looking away. She thought it was an invitation to go to his tent at night. The guy is shocked that this is a romantic comedy because she is underage. For this, they both have to be adults. He winked and apologized, saying she was too small. The girl fell into a stupor. Karina said it was rude of him because Alicia is already 20 years old. The guy jumped up thinking they were joking. It turned out that Karina was 19, and they thought they were both older than him. The guy shouted at the whole that they were no older because he was already 22. Karina was surprised. Alicia laughed, saying that she was a grown man, but she was behaving very strangely. The guy was banging his fists on the carriage seat. He asked if they really thought he was 16 or 17 years old. The girls tried to calm him down, saying that it was a compliment because he looked very young and asked for forgiveness. He sighed, saying that it was okay because he had also confused their ages at first. Karina suggested that the conversation end there. A man was walking in front of the caravan. I'm scattering some pollen on the road to level the ground. The guy noticed it. Men with their hands and feet tied rode on the wagons behind them. In his opinion, it was cruel. Karina drew attention to this and said that it was still not worth sympathizing with. A team of 35 people is said to have entered the forest to catch baby royal monkeys. It was a fairly large team, but only 5 of them survived. The guy asked why they needed the cubs of the royal monkey. It turned out that they have been tamed since childhood and used as a labor force, most often for the army. They wear slave collars. The guy shuddered. For him, it was an object with a terrible name. He was wondering how expensive they were. If the age is not more than 2 months, then 20 gold coins. If less than 6 months, then 10 gold coins. He asked if those guys were criminals. They replied that it was a delicate matter, but it was their own fault that they provoked a pack of monkeys. At the very least, they will have to take responsibility for yesterday's battle. After all, it was a crime. But if they can't pay, then they will become slaves because of the debt. It turned out that being an adventurer is not profitable at all. Karina smiled because she is also an adventurer. He begged her forgiveness. If you work steadily, then it is quite profitable. They were just unlucky, as 2 herds attacked at once. Alicia turned to her, asking if they had investigated the case well. It turns out that they didn't even check if their team members were still alive. It was weird. It was a pretty tough world for him. The wheels of the carriage were spinning. The guy apologized for being stupid around such girls. They replied that they forgave him. After all, the culture and customs of this country are very different from his. But they noticed that he was still trying. Karina also asked Alicia not to overpraise him. The guy put a bag on his lap, which was given to him by the main merchant, and invited the girls to rest. He took out sandwiches and drinks for everyone from his bag. He handed them to the girls, offering them a try. They were very surprised. He told them not to be afraid, it's the food of his country. He handed them snacks, telling them to try a different culture. They should like it. The girls held out their hands and accepted gifts from the guy. They began to look at the food from different angles and sniff it. He told them not to be afraid to tell the truth. He is very interested in their opinion. Karina asked about the magic bag that was lying on his lap. Had the head merchant given it to him to hide the vault? It was true. That's why the products turned out to be so fresh. He started tearing open the package until he heard someone shout from the side. He turned in that direction and looked out the window. It turned out to be the village of Takura. There were huge mountains and fields, mills and other buildings. He turned his head in different directions, trying to look around. Karina fell in behind him, but she couldn't see anything from there. The guy said they needed to have lunch as soon as possible. He showed them a bottle of water, saying it was a vessel of water, with a special transparent packaging like a sandwich. They should understand that he doesn't show this to everyone. Karina told him not to worry and he thanked her. He asked if that meant they would rest for about an hour. Can they walk around the outskirts of the village? Alicia agreed, saying it was a great idea. Karina said, why don't they take a walk after they eat in the carriage? First, she will see what the village looks like. After lunch, they will walk not on the outskirts but in the center. It was a big village. The girl thinks it's more important for Daichi to see different cultures, not landscapes. Besides, you need to buy shoes and clothes. She noticed what the guy was wearing. They don't wear that in these parts. He pulled back the edges of his jacket and thought he stood out too much. He agreed that they could do that and asked Alicia if she would mind. Karina thanked him. She likes that they have returned to the purpose of escorting. The guy, looking at her face, seems to have had a heart attack. Clearing his throat in embarrassment, he asked how far she would go. She thinks it will take 15 or 20 minutes. Then he said that he and Alicia would wait for her in the carriage. The loaf stopped. Everyone got down the horses. The cat was running freely around the carriage. While the hero was humming a song, looking out the window, Nick ran up to the girl and put his front paws on her dress. Alicia wanted to play with him. The cat reacted to this and played with her. The guy paid attention to them. Those two were clearly very much involved. The girl moved her hand very quickly, and the cat could not catch her in any way until one moment. The girl said that Nick was very fast and started using magic, saying that then she needed to speed up too. They started moving even faster. Not only Nick but also Alicia has a strengthening of physical strength. It's hard to believe my eyes. The girl abruptly grabbed the cat and smiled. She noticed that Nick also has a strengthening of physical strength. She had exposed them after all. He made a serious face, asking Alicia if she could keep it all a secret just between them. She asked him if it was really just between them, and he said yes again. She was embarrassed and said since Daichi wants it that way. A strange atmosphere hung between them. They repeated each other's names. Until at one point the carriage door opened and Karina walked in. The girl was distracted and smiling asked her if she had finished yet. The guy noticed that it was very fast. Karina looked at them and said that they were staying in this village for 2 days. The guy sighed and asked if something had happened. It turned out that the damage received from the royal monkeys turned out to be much more than they thought. Repairs are needed, and the carriage won't be able to go either. They need to stop here and rest for now. That is, she offers to finally eat their lunch. The guy asked her if she wanted a sandwich and she smiled and agreed. This is the moment. Looking at her contented face, he remembered yesterday, which was all covered in blood. He put the water sandwiches on the carriage seat. Karina was convinced what an unusual meal it was. Alicia asked how to eat it. The guy said it was just bread, she needs to bite him. It turned out to be very soft. The girls did as he said and took a bite. Their eyes shone. Karina is surprised that there are 2 whole pieces and meat in the middle. It was amazing. The second agreed, it was very tasty. Slightly toasted soft bread, tender meat between its slices which melts in your mouth. In addition, the gorgeous greens add piquancy and even the sauce. It was just an incredible taste. They all noticed everything, even the fact that there were vegetables inside. The guy smiled and said that if they liked it, they could take more and handed over more packages. Karina was delighted. She was thanking the guy, holding a mountain of sandwiches in her hands. The guy reached into his briefcase again, taking out a bunch more sweets. It was fruits and other snacks. The smell was very sweet. Next to him, Nick began to meow. The guy told him to calm down, he has something for him. He pulled out a bowl of cat food and the cat began to eat. He held out his hand to the cat, saying that he also wanted to eat. At that moment, the cat hit him with its paw. Alicia laughed, saying that he didn't want to be disturbed. Karina was already trying a sandwich with cream and fruit at that moment. She seems to have received a gastronomic shock. The guy asked her what she thought. She found it very sweet and soft. He explained that this is a fresh cream, it is popular among girls. She noticed that this thing is very tasty. Of course, it will be popular. The guy asked if she wanted more and she said yes. He asked if she liked to eat different dishes where cream was used. If she wants, she can try them. He thought it was funny. She agreed with a sweet smile. At that moment, the guy's heart skipped a beat again. He put his hand to his chest. He was very glad that they liked everything. At that moment, Karina realized something and asked if the food wasn't expensive. The guy with the rather convincing face asked them if he really looked like someone who cared about money. The embarrassed guard turned away and told him he was a fool. The guy just smiled at this, remembering his past, where he ate ready-made food from the store alone. He was smiling at them. He turned back to his backpack and took out 2 plates of cake and placed them on the carriage seat right in front of the girls. Tents were re-erected everywhere. The head merchant, with a very strange face, asked if he had really hit the royal monkey in flight. Karina knows it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. The merchant asked if he had really defeated 5 monkeys. She was busy at that moment, and it might seem like that to her. She replied that she had not stopped watching them during the fight. The merchant just gave up. With the help of wind magic, she can sense movement even out of sight. It wasn't quite like that, but okay. That's what happened to Mr. Asakura last night when the royal monkeys attacked. The merchant squeezed his temples with his hand. He looked tired enough. He said that even she would hardly have the physical strength to resist their fangs. Asakura wouldn't have helped with a knife either. If he had a sword, he would be able to overcome it. There are 4 monkeys, but no more. If that's the case, then he doesn't know anyone on this continent who can use magic without gadgets. The girl thought the same way. It was weird. The kid can't control either the sword or his body. He has no combat experience, but he is capable of something more. But he knows how to use magic without objects. To be honest, it was hard for her to say. He was also new to trading. Bertrade said she must know some capable merchants. He's hardly one of them, however his knowledge is close to practice. The girl asked if the guy was a nobleman from another continent. After all, it may be so. If what was said was true, then it would explain a lot. The girl asked what he would order this time. She thought his powers were suspicious. He also wants to keep the fact that he is from another continent a secret. Then let it remain confidential information. He is a key figure for them. Mr. Asakura not only saved them but also helped their company. Karina knew that. He told her to continue to accompany him, especially when they arrive in the city of Harem. Local residents may have a negative attitude towards him. He wants her to give him more information so that others don't find out what they're not supposed to. The girl accepted the order and thought that he was like a hero. She remembered the moment when he was smiling, holding out 2 pieces of cake, and she smiled at the memory. She's finally back with the guys. It was fast enough for them. A little later, the streets in the middle of the village, which were lined with houses on both sides. The sign of the atelier inside which the heroes entered. There were a lot of different clothes. The guy tried on some of them for himself. I asked them how they were. The girls looked at it carefully. Karina noticed that he looked like a traveler in this. The cat, as if confirming, meowed. The guy was pulling at his shirt, asking if that meant it didn't suit him. Alice said that he was wearing clothes from another country all the time, and if he continued, then what would people think? Karina said that it doesn't matter if it suits him or not, the main thing is that it suits the local environment. Do they want to say that he should not stand out? Would he look weird? Travelers cannot wear such clothes. The guy noticed that she was kinder when she ate sweets, and got hit on the back. He folded all the clothes, saying he was done. He turned to the saleswoman, saying that he would take it all and handle the rest himself. He called the saleswoman his sister. She smiled sweetly at this, saying that she was already a little sister, she was already too old. The guy put his hands on the counter and rested his chin, saying that she was only 4 years older than him, no more. She can be quite good for herself as a sister. The saleswoman smiled, telling him that he was a flatterer, she had a daughter about his age. He's sure he'd think they were sisters no more. She was pleased with his words, so she allowed him to take some more things. He paid attention to the bill. Karina nodded. At that moment, the guy reached into his briefcase, asking if he could pay with this instead of silver coins, and took out a silver ingot. Everyone nearby was shocked. At the same moment, Karina stood between him and the saleswoman, asking him to wait. She paid for it herself, throwing coins on the table. The surprised saleswoman only managed to say that everything was fine while Karina was taking the guy out of the store. Finally, they found themselves on the street, and she was yelling at Daichi and asking if he was really doing this on purpose. He said with an uncomprehending face that he just wanted to pay with silver. She hid her face behind her hand. It really was her mistake. The guy was smiling, pointing his finger to the side and saying that they needed to go to the next store. Karina grabbed him by the collar. First, we need to go to the head of the Bertram company. And she walked forward, holding the guy by the scruff of the neck, while he dragged himself along the ground with a smiling face. It was a rather strange sight for passersby. The head trader asked the guy why he did it. The guy thought about it and, looking up, replied that he just wanted to pay. At that time, Alicia was playing outside with Nick. The merchant pointed with his finger at the silver ingot lying on the table. He asked if he really wanted to pay with this. He has not seen silver coins on this continent, and the ingot is used instead in his homeland. And he didn't understand what was wrong with paying with a silver plate. The main merchant was suspicious to find out how he had failed to find out about the coins before their meeting. For him, there is water, food, and everything necessary in his storage, so he did not have to spend money. Karina, standing behind him, seemed to be furious. Klaus rubbed his face wearily with his hand. If that's what he says, then fine. And he should have realized that he didn't have any local money. The guy remembered something and picked up his briefcase again, said that was why he needed them. He asked if Bertram wanted to buy something from him. He empties the contents of the briefcase onto the table. Klaus was completely desperate. A little later, the guy was already walking along the street of the city with the coins received from the merchant. He tossed coins, air, and caught it with his hands. Before he left, he said that when he arrived in Harem, he needed to be careful. What is normal in his country will be strange in this one. Even if he still has any items from his homeland, the merchant wants him not to show them to anyone. Under no circumstances and in no case. The guy was walking behind Karina and, approaching her, asked if she was still angry. She replied in the negative, but it was obvious from her face that she was clearly lying. The guy cupped his hands in a supplicating gesture and asked for forgiveness for not consulting her. He was asking if he could somehow cheer her up. She, angry, replied that she was fine with him. She was not satisfied with his attitude to escort work. The guy was confused. Although it was for the purpose of exploring the world, it was completely his fault for everything. He said he would be careful next time. He made a promise. The girl closed her eyes and immediately turned to him, shouting that since he did not know, it was okay, but from now on she wanted him to consult with her about upcoming plans and think before doing anything. He agreed. The cat that Alicia was holding meowed. Karina ran up to him and stroked him. She had a smile on her face. She, pleased, said that she needed to apologize to Nick because he was probably angry too. The owner is to blame for all this. The guy asked that, didn't she say she wasn't mad? But the answer was that Karina immediately took out her sword and pointed it at the guy with an evil look. He immediately pulled out a lot of goodies and sweets and held out his hand with the contents to the girl, telling her to take it as an apology. The girl, who was clearly seduced by the sweets, pretended that she was not uninterested in it. She asked if he wanted to bribe her with sweets, but he denied it. He said she was from his homeland. When inconveniencing a beloved girlfriend or girlfriend, they give chocolate as an apology. Although this is not true, if it were always possible to make amends in this way, there would be no problems left in the world. He distributed sweets to the girls. It seems that Karina either believed him or pretended to believe him just to accept the snacks. If that's what he says and it's true, then maybe she can take it. The girls tasted the sweets. It turned out to be very tasty. They asked what it was. The guy took out more, saying that he had enough of them. The girls immediately sorted everything out. It was fast. He was even starting to worry. But once again, as a matter of fact, he asked for forgiveness. He was forgiven, but only on the condition that he would be more careful next time. He swore it. They were walking between the market stalls in a crowd of people. The guy noticed that there are a lot of adventurers there. Considering what kind of village it is, it was not surprising. Karina didn't like it at all. It seemed to the guy that they were looking unfriendly, and he wasn't the only one who noticed it. Daichi doesn't have a weapon with him right now, and they probably could have found out that he was working with Bertram's company. He looks weak and also from another country. Bad people will only see him as a target. These words didn't seem funny, but these aren't royal monkeys, are they? He wants to go to the gun store. Karina warned him not to seek adventure this time and to be careful. She asked him to take care of himself. He spread his arms out to the side and told him to trust him. Despite his appearance, he is quite a peaceful citizen. The girl didn't seem to pay attention to it. She hopes he hasn't gained too much self-confidence after the fight with the monkeys. The guy was embarrassed. He pointed his fingers at the drinking adventurers and asked, "If you compare them to monkeys, then who is weaker?" The girls made disapproving faces. They didn't understand how he could say that. He clarified that it was just for the sake of interest. Alicia didn't want to say anything bad, but if the fight was one-on-one, then the royal monkey would most likely win. However, adventurers can team up with someone and, for example, use traps and various tricks. The guy threw his hands up, saying that enough talking about these scary people. It's better to go buy equipment. They went into the armory, and the guy immediately noticed a lot of different balls. But Karina immediately let go of his ardor, saying that first you need to buy armor. The guy tried on one of them in the form of a vest. Karina wanted to ask him if she was too light, but Nick will not be cramped. He will be able to hide, as before, under his clothes. She asked if he had changed his mind about something heavy. Alicia noticed how kind he was after all. He was scratching his head in embarrassment, asking if she really thought that. They had enough magic armor. The guy grabbed a huge shield in his hands, to which Karina replied that armor and shield did not count. Alicia praised his stamina because he can hold such a huge object. He seems to be spending physical strength, but at the same time he seems to be walking with a billboard. The guy waved the shield from side to side so that it would not stand out. It would be better to keep it in the vault. Then he decided to start using weapons. In his dreams, he wanted a long sword, just like in a fantasy RPG. They walked over to the sword rack. Karina asked if he used a long sword, but he needs a weapon to intimidate, so he doubts that he will use it for its intended purpose. He stood and smiled as if he had said something clever. Alicia noticed that he was pretty good at it. Karina, on the other hand, seemed speechless. That's because he has physical strength and magical armor. The guy put some mana into his sword and thought it was better than fencing. After all, it is very profitable to possess magic. The one to whom she is subject wins. If you have magic, you can channel its power into physical strength and plow the field faster than any other person. For example, he can light a fire as easily as Karina. Otherwise, you will have to use flint. Magic items are usually used by those who are good at magic. Other subjects are ignored by ordinary people. As a result, there is an increasing gap between those who can use magic and those who cannot. Everything is spiraling. Can't he help a little bit? Sales of glass products to the royal nobility and the rich. He wants to provide things at a low price to those who cannot control magic. It is a cheap and convenient product. The guy thought about it, and Karina asked him what happened to him. He smiled and turned around, saying that there was nothing wrong, he just remembered his homeland. Then they walked through the shops and shops. Then they went into a narrow alley where there was no one. Daichi said that he had learned something while shopping. Due to the frequent appearance of goblins near Takura village, the Adventurers Guild asked the adventurers to destroy them. After receiving the request, 3 parties went there. There were 13 of them. But according to unofficial data, about 7 teams went, 40 people. Karina noted that there were too many of them, even if the number of goblins would be unknown. Moreover, those who went there themselves may be inexperienced. Those who joined must have a reason. After all, there is no need for not so many people. The guy asked if these monsters were strong. The goblin uses the magic of objects, but there's also a goblin, a general, or worse. They use their abilities for physical strength without objects. So many people went there suspiciously. The guy completely agreed with her. Judging by the adventurers she had met and their equipment, they were of rank E at best D. The rank of adventurers starts with H, which was the lowest. It is usually worn by students. The best was S. Adventurers with a rank are recognized as high-ranking aristocrats. They are even higher than the graphs. This can be compared with the title of knight. The S rank is awarded to those who have achieved great achievements. The king personally awards them. S and A are quite honorable. They are exceptional. 7 ranks from A to G are basic. Of course, the power does not depend on them in any way. Ranks are primarily based on merit. Nevertheless, adventurers with level D and above are real fighters who have gone through many battles in their lives. The guy asked what rank Karina had. It turns out that she is of rank C. He has not really understood about these ranks yet, but he thinks that he can rely on her. She has quite a lot of experience. The guy thought about it. Shouldn't he be given a rank, he's strong, to remember only his victories over the tiger and the royal monkeys? He hadn't used all the weapons yet. They need to get back to the adventurers. Even though they don't know the exact number of goblins, aren't there too many people going there? It was all very, very suspicious. He asked Karina if she had any thoughts about it. If so, then you need to tell me. Alicia joined in and said she wanted to know too if she told Daichi I wouldn't do anything stupid again. The girl actively waved her hands and pointed at the cat, saying that even he wants to know. She got close to the guy. He took the cat out from under his clothes and put it in her hands. She hugged the cat and lifted the air, immediately ran away to play with him. He turned to Karina for an answer. 2 months ago, bandits carried out a brutal attack on a village 4 days from here and killed everyone. The guy thought about it. The whole village was destroyed. It was kind of weird. Goblins often appear in those surroundings, and a request has recently been sent to destroy them. Upon the arrival of help, the village was razed to the ground. A lot of adventurers went there, but they returned without killing anyone. For the extermination of goblins located near the settlement, the feudal lord promised half the amount of the reward. And if he leaves his post or the adventurers decide to leave, the task will remain unfulfilled. And if you do not cope with the feudal lord's order, then it will rather be a matter of trust in the adventurer, not a fine. The public will consider them not incompetent. If they were to complete this task, they should first expand the search area. She would try to destroy as many goblins as she could. Adventurers and bandits. Did she mean to say that they could all be from the same clan? That's exactly what Karina assumed. The guy wondered if this meant that this village could be the next target, and this was a great opportunity to get even with the bandits. He remembered the gun in his inventory. He told the girls that he had to check something. He asked if they would like to go with him. They agreed. He wants to try out the weapons brought from his homeland. Let Karina appreciate its power and convenience and how secretive it is. She thought about it. If 3 people see it, it means it's already noticeable. She wonders if it's ridiculous. The guy sighed. He and Karina killed 5 royal monkeys. Doesn't that mean she's stronger than General Goblin? She said as she snapped that unfortunately he was much more powerful than the monkey. The guy shrugged his shoulders. Alicia asked what about Paul? Even if something happens, they will be able to escape at any moment thanks to their physical strength. The guy was glad, so Alicia uses it too, but it turned out to be only a little. At that moment, Nick calmly lay down on the girl's head and seemed to doze off. Karina, who was standing behind the girl, looked at him strangely. He looked at me questioningly. If it's in the woods, it'll do. She wanted them to avoid the presence of other people. Physical force should be used exclusively from afar and provided that it is needed to accompany the caravan. He agreed to this condition and had already turned around to go. At that moment, someone ran past and pushed him in the shoulder. The man was yelling at Daichi and was aggressive. If this had happened in Japan, then there would have been no trace of Daichi. But now, since N was able to defeat the royal monkeys and Karina is next to her, he is not afraid. Daichi replied to the man that the aggressive man had bumped into him himself. At that moment, they were surrounded by other large men, residents of this village. It seems they were also with their own interests. The assaulted man insulted him. I asked the adventurer how he dares to say such a thing. Locals turned around, looking at the scuffle. Other adventurers drinking on the sidelines also noticed them and talked among themselves. The guy sighed. On all sides, aggressive men asked if they were scared and why they were silent. One of them noticed which beauties were next to Daichi. If that's the case, then he's not from the poor. They wanted to take all his money and women. Karina warned them that if they came even one step closer to them, they should blame themselves. They're in trouble. Daichi turned to the girls, asking who was stronger than these people again or one royal monkey. The girls looked at him, wondering if he was serious about asking this. And how can they be compared at all? The men asked Karina if she was really that cool if she accompanied them. She started provoking them, saying sarcastically that she was very scared. One of the men asked if she was really thinking of joking here. Did she dare to fight all of them? If she wants to fight, the man asked her to move away. One of them has already made plans for her. The heroes were stunned by the absurdity of this situation. After all, they talk exactly like characters in some manga, but when they tell your friend that, it makes him angry. Maybe it's worth trying out weapons on them. He asked the girls if they were bothering them. One word and he would get rid of them. Karina turned to him and replied that if he killed them, they would be in trouble. But if these guys get a few injuries, then nothing bad will happen. The man who first hit Daichi in the shoulder got angry, asking him if he really wanted to fight and kicked him. Daichi said he was just a merchant. Karina turned to him again, saying that if he killed them, he would have to pay the feudal lord a large compensation. He thought about it. You can be a murderer, but all you have to do is pay and you're free. This world scares him. He won't kill them, he'll only hurt them. Let this be a lesson for others. Since they are adventurers, they should be ready for anything. The men took out their weapons and rushed at them, shouting insults. Karina screamed that she wouldn't let them do that. Daichi once again asked the girl if he really could keep them, and she agreed. The hero, standing up, told the girls to get ready as well. Asakura Daichi draws his sword from its scabbard. The blade of the weapon, ready for a merciless attack, sparkles brightly. All the residents were perplexed by such an act of the guy. He turns to the bandit and says that he, by virtue of his immense kindness, will not take their lives, but they must be prepared for excruciating suffering. Suddenly, two men suddenly fly at Daichi, who were already ready to attack with might and main. They didn't understand how the guy dared to say that. They believed that the boy wanted to fight with them, and they were ready to show him what they were capable of. Asakura Daichi turns around to tell Karina that she can handle these two men thanks to her outstanding skills. He told Alicia to stand behind him. The girls obeyed, determined to win as if there was no other way. He remembered that he could use his unique cheating ability right now. All this in order to get modern items and exchange them. Asakura Daichi can take out everything except living creatures with the help of a huge storage space. The guy uses the unique skill magic without objects, increasing his strength and the power of objects. He is enthusiastically thinking about what will happen if all the abilities are combined, and he is enthusiastically preparing to implement the idea. The guy hit two men with one blow so that one fell on the other. They somehow got up from the ground. The men definitely did not expect such a powerful attack without significant effort. As soon as the bandits came to their senses and turned their gaze back to Daichi, they were greatly horrified because the guy began using his skill, which could simply take their lives in an instant, and they would not even have time to blink an eye. One of the men's legs seemed to sink into the dark mud that had appeared. The man started screaming and after a few seconds jumped back some distance, waving his leg. However, the man could not jump far away. The girl made an attack with lightning speed. Suddenly, everyone nearby clutched their wrists in horror. As it turned out, she had injured the tendons of all the opponents at once. The guy is surprised by this technique and asks the girl if she really injured the men's tendons. The girl meekly, but confidently and resolutely agrees. The men sat on the ground and convulsively held their wrists to somehow stop the flow of fluids from the wound. They look at her with eyes full of inhuman fear. The girl sharply pointed her sword at one of the opponents and stated that her attack was a punishment for them, because earlier she had clearly said that no one should approach the one she was accompanying. Those who attacked were horrified again. They obviously would not like to feel such pain again, which seemed to drive them crazy. The men started screaming for mercy and promised not to approach the girl and the guy from now on. The girl, still pointing the blade of the sword towards the attackers, ordered to convey her words to the supporters and friends of the men. They, in turn, promised to fulfill everything that the girl said. Residents laughed at the failed attack and whispered to each other that a whole group of men had been defeated by just one woman. It would be hard to imagine, but here many people saw it live. Suddenly, Nick, who was sitting in the girl's arms, meowed loudly and capriciously. Asakura Daichi pays attention to this and asks if the pet was asleep, and after a moment mentally considered him lazy. Suddenly, Alicia lowered her head, stroking and soothing the cat, and her face darkened. She feels sorry for the pet because she thinks that this noise could have woken him up and prevented him from resting. The girl steps step by step closer to the men. At first, she quietly asked to apologize, and at first the men did not even understand the reason for this behavior. By then, the girl had already screamed for the robbers to apologize to her kitten for waking him up. Karina looked at Alicia in disbelief, as did the bandits, surprised by her sudden concern for justice for the sake of the kitten. Alicia held the kitten up to Karina's face and asked if she didn't feel sorry for the baby, whose sleep was so rudely interrupted by noise. Alicia ordered the men to apologize quickly for interrupting the kitten's sleep. They immediately rushed to their knees with apologies and promises that this would not happen again. Nick the kitten meowed happily. Alicia, with a playful and cheerful wink, explains to the men that her pet is kind, and now they are incredibly lucky because they will remain safe and sound and will be able to return home. Karina wipes the sweat from her forehead with her hand. She is glad that everything turned out well because a cat with magical powers is a very scary thing, which can cause simply irreparable harm to others and themselves. Karina turns to Asakura Daichi and asks him about the weapon the guy used to take the bandit's leg. The girl accuses him of overdoing his killing skills too much. The guy waves it off and reminds the girl that she herself damaged all the tendons of her opponents at once. and was able to neutralize them in a split second so that they couldn't even compete with them. The guys set off on their way. When they came to a small bridge, Karina explained that if you use water magic, you can heal your wound. However, unfortunately, it will not be possible to cure a severed limb in this way. Karina adds that you will have to pay a huge amount for treatment in the royal capital. The guy understands that if he gets hurt, he will be fine, because the magic of water will be able to restore him. Karina and Nick can definitely help with this guy if anything happens. Asakura Daichi praises Karina and remarks that the bandits probably won't recover soon now. The men sat and writhed in pain. They certainly did not expect such a reception. In response, the girl explains that men can use dirty and unacceptable techniques instead of direct attacks. For example, you can wait for the guys at the house or hotel. The guy didn't think about it and assumed that they could be ambushed even in the tent. Karina agrees, and then the guy throws himself on his knees in front of the girl, apologizing in the way it is customary in his homeland. The guys approach the sign that leads to the dark forest. Karina asks the guy about what he did to deprive the man of a limb. The girl still couldn't figure out how this could be done and what kind of magic it could be attributed to. Karina asks the guy not to pretend, confident that he has a technique that allows him to instantly deal with bandits, because one of them was left without a leg in an instant. The guy calmly explains that his skill is unique and available only to him. Karina and Alicia, amazed, patiently waited for the continuation. The guy spreads his arms and says that there is no such skill on this continent. Alicia wanted to object, but the guy continued talking about his homeland. He's probably thinking about what's really going on. Karina stopped the guy's speech with an outstretched palm. She is seriously saying that only one person has this skill. Then the guy completely stopped understanding why it was necessary to talk about the fact that there are not very many such people. Asakura exhales and scratches the back of her head. He looks with a smile at Nick, who is sitting in a hood, and explains to the girls that he had to leave his homeland because of this skill. The guy covers his face with his hand. He understands that his exceptional possession of such a skill threatened his family with great danger. Daichi had to retreat because of this. He asks the girls for their opinion on this. Karina and Alicia immediately lowered their heads. They understood how difficult the choice had to be made by the guy for the sake of their relatives and friends. Such an act would hardly be done by a person who does not care about his relatives. The guy keeps walking. He suggests that Karina and Alicia would be interested in listening to his story. The girls said that everything was fine and Daichi didn't have to tell them if he didn't want to. Asakura Daichi turns around and says with a soft smile that this story will be their secret. He looks at his open palm where a small bullet appears and talks about his unique skill. The guy can instantly create lead and iron and then shoot them with fire, hitting opponents. It is only necessary to activate the ability. Karina looks thoughtfully and with genuine interest at the bullet that appeared on the guy's palm. She is surprised that such a small piece of lead can only be used for human limbs, and this is just what she happened to see. Daichi continues to say that if you use the power of fire on a bullet, then at high speed it will shoot with unimaginable force, which can not only deprive limbs, but also create something more terrifying. The guy takes the bullet between his fingers and explains that it has a devastating effect. Karina doesn't even want to imagine how dangerous this attack is, because the skill she demonstrated earlier is making itself felt. The guy says that he would like to experiment with the girls. He's going to show Karina and Alicia his unique skill and listen to tips for real combat that the girls can give him based on their observations. Karina assumes that the guy is no longer going to use that thing. He refuses, because he would like to experiment a little more and show them only a small part of what he is capable of. The guy with the burning eyes offers to have a snack after the experiments. Karina thinks about the guy talking about sweets again. The girl couldn't even imagine that the guy was referring to any other snacks. The guy refutes the girl's assumptions and says that in addition to sweets, you can also enjoy salty snacks. The guy asks Karina about what she would like to have a snack after the experiment and its evaluation. Karina was a little embarrassed. She will be happy with all sorts of goodies. The guy is glad that he was able to persuade the girl. He will be very interested to know the girl's impressions about his skill. Karina agreed with a smile. It was at that moment that the guy realized that Karina's big weakness was sweets. Alicia didn't understand her friend's enthusiasm at all, just at the mention of sweets. The guys went to a remote area. The guy looks around and thinks it would be better if they found an open field. After all, to use his skill in the best way, you need a more open area than a forest clearing. Karina reproachfully asked them not to be picky, because they don't know what kind of monsters might be here. In any case, they need to be very careful to prevent and avoid battles with unwanted opponents. Asakura asks Alicia to hold Nick for the duration of the experiment. and the girl is only happy to help with this in order to spend extra time with her pet. The guy notices that Nick is also immensely happy, because Alicia spoils him so much that he definitely won't be unhappy. Suddenly, the kitten, caressing the girl's face, begins to gently crawl into her dress, penetrating deeper into the neckline. Alicia pulled out the kitten and sternly called his name so that the pet would understand that he had not acted very well. Sometimes Daichi feels like she and Nick understand each other without words. Asakura Daichi is incredibly happy for the pet. He mentally congratulates and praises Nick. After all, the pet managed to pull off such a cunning and uncomplicated action, which many people clearly want to do. Karina noticed the guy's strange joy and with some suspicion urged him to start the experiment. The guy used a diggle. It was with his help that the bandit lost a limb because this gun shoots powerful bullets. After all, thanks to his skill, a guy can easily pull absolutely any objects out of his world, including weapons. Asakura makes the vault open in the palm of her hand. Next, he prepares a diggle and uses his skill in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, a bullet crashes into the trunk of a tree with great force so that wooden splinters fly apart. The girls were shocked by this skill. The guy expressed a desire now to listen to the opinion of his friends about what he saw. Alicia said that she had never seen such an attack magic before, and he reminded me about the desired opinion, not surprise. The girl didn't hear the guy's word at first, but then immediately apologized. Karina, with sincere interest, asks Daichi if it was really not the piece of lead that he showed earlier. Karina runs her hand over the tree. She asks if this skill can be reused, and she wonders if it's difficult to constantly use attacking magic at such an incredible speed. Karina refuses the objections. She explains that if a guy has a magic level of C or D, then you can attack multiple targets at the same time. But the magic of the E and F ranks can reduce the power and use this ability constantly. Karina explains to the guy that even the eyes can't see such a speed. Daichi thinks about it and puts his hand to his chin. There are attacks similar to this one in Earth magic, but it turns out that the speed is much lower. It's unlikely that this guy will need it. In the end, being a magician is like carrying a gun all the time. As you can see, even a low-ranking magician is very dangerous for ordinary people, because with their insignificant skills they can cause irreparable harm. Karina does not understand what Asakura Daichi is talking about, because a person who does not use magic can resist a magician without rank using attacking magic. This system is quite difficult for a person who has not yet been to this world to understand. However, if a simple person using attacking magic goes up against an adventurer without abilities, the first one will be stronger. Then the guy looks at the floor and realizes that he is still using magic without objects. The guy wonders if those who use attacking magic are not magicians. As it turned out, Alicia explained that they were actually those who had registered with the guild and were ranked F or higher. And the levels of magicians that Karina mentioned earlier also differ from the ranks of adventurers. As it turned out, these are completely different things that should be distinguished in order to fight more effectively and not spend maximum effort. Asakura Daichi asked me to tell him about these differences while the girls were eating. But suddenly, Karina is happy that the experiments are over now, and this may mean that they can now have a snack and forget about the battles. The guy says that everything is going to be much more serious now and asks the girls to look more closely. Asakura Daichi really hopes that the girls will be able to give him sound advice that will be very useful in the future. Suddenly, a huge weapon appears from his hand, which shoots into the same place where the previous attack hit. The drumming was so loud that the girls had to put their hands over their ears. The bullet hits the same tree, but some were not the most accurate and missed the target. The guy understands that he needs to practice shooting more. However, Nick's water bullets are much more powerful and they have extremely high accuracy. Alicia says that there are magicians who specialize in attacking magic, but with that kind of power, they can only attack one target. Karina confirms the girl's words. It is simply impossible to state a simpler and more concise truth. The guy understands that Nick's water abilities are much better than those of cool magicians who use attacking magic in battle and for their own purposes. Obviously, the main abilities of a pet should be kept secret in order to have a trump card up your sleeve. The guy wants to ask you something. He asks the girls if it is possible to shoot through this tree with the help of attacking magic. After all, no one except a high-class magician is capable of doing this. Karina thinks about it. If explosive fire or earth magic is difficult to break a large stone, then such a large tree is even more impossible to break. The task that Asakura has set for himself is quite difficult. Karina turns to Alicia and asks her opinion. The girl says that if 3 people use earth magic with objects, one will use earth spiritual magic, then there are chances. However, in addition to this, you also need a very accurate shooter. Compared to the attacking magic that appears by carving small water bullets, it's a bit strange. The high-class magic of this world is an extremely rare case, which can only be encountered with great luck. Karina asked Daichi not to worry. She also guesses that Daichi was thinking about shooting at that big tree with something to continue showing off his skills to the girls. With a serene smile, the guy remembers his arsenal and realizes that Nick's magic is now his main trump card. The guys decided to take a break and have a snack. Having laid out a table in a clearing among the trees, they enjoyed eating desserts resembling strawberry cakes, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. Asakura Daichi wants to clarify about the ranks of the magicians, but the girls asked to give them the opportunity to finally have a quiet meal after a long journey and a tedious, but very interesting presentation of skills. The guy reminds me that he wanted to discuss something. The girls ask about it with interest, and the guy explains that he plans to open a shop in this village. His eyes are full of enthusiasm, and the girls patiently listen to his idea. The guy wants to open a shop in this village. The girls begin to speak one word in one voice, starting with this. They obviously didn't expect to hear such an offer from a guy. It was obvious that each of the girls had their own opinion about this. Karina is not very happy with this idea because she finds it quite scary. She believes that the guy will sell strange goods to the villagers again. After all, many people have no idea how to use strange products. Alicia finds this idea very interesting. The difficulty was that the guy listens to the speeches at the same time. Asakura asked to first look at his plan of action and the arrangement of the shop before he was seen by the head of Klaus. He especially wanted to show Alicia the plan, as she can use magic items. Just for the record, Daichi said this so that the girls would be aware of his current plan. Asakura Daichi takes out matches and lighting sticks from her bag. The girls are interested in what kind of objects they are because they have never seen them, and they were incredibly interested to find out what it was intended for. Alicia and Karina carefully examine the objects. The guy understands that this is the first time they've seen this, and they don't know how to use it at all. It was very obvious because it's not every day that you encounter objects from another world. The guy lights one match. Asakura explains that this is not just an ordinary object but water-resistant matches. Suddenly, a small but very bright and persistent flame flares up on a piece of wood. Karina thinks it might be magic. Alicia did not agree with this because she absolutely does not feel the use of magical power. The girls wondered how they could get fire without magic or any objects. The guy explains that this is not a magical object or magic at all. It can also be used by ordinary people who don't have any attributes. Daichi says that these matches are very easy to light. The guy explains that it's also easy to set fire to anything with them. For example, he throws a small wooden board with a flame on a pile of gathered dried leaves. The bunch starts to flare up. Alicia wonders if these matches can be used to replace a magic item. The guy adds a special liquid to a pile of leaves and agrees with the girl. He easily demonstrates all the completely ordinary properties of objects in his world. Asakura Daichi explains that he wants to sell such items to those who cannot use magic due to any circumstances. Giving the opportunity to use magic to those who can't is commendable. Karina, eating strawberries with a piece of cake, thinks that selling such items to ordinary people is somehow not very profitable. She doesn't fully understand Asakura's goals and the reason he decided to do it anyway. The guy expresses his sincere desire to make life easier for these people. After all, that's why he's going to sell suitable items at a price convenient for ordinary people. Karina looks at the guy in disbelief, and Alicia's gaze is overflowing with sympathy. Daichi asks what happened, and the girls shake their heads from side to side, making it clear that everything is fine. The guy keeps saying that the rich always buy rare things anyway, and it's not very right. Karina admits that she hadn't even thought about it. It's not always possible to think about such things when you have so many things to do. The guy doesn't listen to the girl and says that the rich can afford anything. Karina, on the other hand, furrows her brows and repeats again that she hasn't even thought about this topic. Alicia understands that they will be a great success. She suggests that Daichi start selling consumables because of this, his idea can become terribly problematic. Asakura Daichi understands that there are no difficulties with the availability of goods now. And Karina immediately remembers that he has a large storage, and the guy will definitely never have problems with the availability or quantity of any product. Asakura understands the danger of the situation and says that in a difficult moment he will definitely come up with something. Alicia doesn't understand why the guy is so carefree. Does Asakura Daichi really think that everything will be so simple? The guy smiles and looks into the distance. He thinks there's nothing difficult about it. In any case, he's going to show it to Head Klaus so that he can properly familiarize himself with the plan and the idea for sales. The guy confidently looks ahead. He is absolutely sure that difficult does not mean that it is impossible. The girls eat sweets and realize that they will not be able to convince Asakura Daichi. The girls are eating their second cheesecake. The guy reminds me of one thing. He asks Karina if she has the magic of the elements and how much of each of them. He is very interested in learning about it. Karina, holding a fork in front of her, lists 3 elements: water, fire, and wind. Daichi looks at things with enthusiasm and asks about how many elemental magic she possesses. Alicia folds her hands in front of her and looks at them. She modestly said that she knows absolutely all the elements. At first glance, you wouldn't say that such a fragile and sweet girl has so much power. The guy is just shocked by this. Now he thinks Alicia is even more cool. Karina explains that the fact that Alicia has all the magic techniques is a big secret. Asakura Daichi expresses her understanding and guesses that it is not worth asking the girls about anything further. This is necessary in order not to be intrusive and to preserve his relationship with Karina and Alicia. After that, Karina reproached Alicia for not saying the answer to such a question right away. Alicia was a little sad and apologized. This information is quite important, and it is obvious that it must be kept secret. Asakura guesses that both girls are magicians, and that means they're definitely in the guild. This, in turn, means that girls can safely talk about the ranks that Daichi wants to know so much about. Karina agrees. She says that she and Alicia have a high rank. It seems that the strongest is the A rank, and the weaker ones go in ascending order of letters in the alphabet. This scheme is quite simple, and it is not difficult to understand it even for someone who came from another world. Asakura Daichi was shocked by the level of the girls. He thinks they're cool magicians. Asakura Daichi thought that they had a low level at all, but this, as it turned out, was far from the case. The guy says that Karina's appearance does not mean that she is a skilled magician. After all, she even fought with the royal monkey with a sword, not magic. It was not immediately clear to Asakura what was going on, and he wanted an explanation. Karina explains that she has a rank, and she has magic without objects and wind magic. Daichi wonders if Karina used magic during the battle with the royal monkeys. Karina explains this incident by saying that at that time she simply put all her strength into the attack. Karina needs time to use a lot of magic, and she didn't have that opportunity then. Karina remembers that Asakura used wind magic and thus wasted all his energy. It was a very unwise decision. After all, in order to fight for a long time, you need to properly distribute your forces. The guy apologizes. He suggests that the girl try the ice cream, which tastes like whipped cream. The ice cream in the cup beckons with its attractive and appetizing appearance. Karina notices that the guy has somehow become kinder, and ice cream really looks like cream in appearance. The girl tastes a small piece in a spoon and immediately blurs in delight from the taste. At this time, Daichi asks if Alicia is also a B rank. The girl explains that she has no combat experience. After all, when she first saw the royal monkey, she was in shock and couldn't even raise her hand. Daichi asks the girl if she can use magic items. The girl agrees. Fortunately, she had the ability to enchant, so she also decided to try this skill, which helped them in that difficult battle. The guy clarifies about the enchantment skill. Alicia explains that items that are used against witchcraft are magic that can be used to improve the performance of an item. For example, if you enchant an object with fire, then the thing will receive fiery properties. That's how it works. It seems that there is nothing difficult in this, but in fact it requires simply tremendous skills. Alicia happily says that in the same way you can understand the power of the subject, then it can be exploited even by those who are unable to use magical attributes. As long as the magic is in the item, Alicia can use it. Inspired, Daichi says that if you compare one magical item and 4 enchanted ones, they will be equal in strength. However, Karina says that everything is far from that simple. Alicia explains that the magic of enchantment is far from limited. For example, an object for ignition will ignite. If the user has a high-class magical item toolkit, it will seem that he controls the size of the fire, but it will be very expensive. There is one reason, but it is very dangerous. The less you use this item, the better. It can happen that a guy wants to light a stove, but it will turn out to be fire bullets that can cause harm. The guy asks the girl with interest about being born with enchantment. Karina confirms and explains that this is an innate talent. It's very rare to meet people with such talent, but Daichi was just lucky. The guy had already thought that it might be worth putting aside the idea of creating magical items. He thinks that he would like an enemy detection station, but it would be almost impossible to wear it. The guy also doesn't want to strain Nick. After all, he usually plays the role of a guy's secret weapon. When the critical moment comes, Daichi forces him to use water magic. Polina guesses that if Nick detects enemies with the help of Karina's wind magic, it may well work. He asks Karina to show how she searches for an opponent with the help of wind magic. Karina was skeptical about this question, because she thinks that this is not something that can be demonstrated and immediately seen. She obviously didn't want to show off her skill right away, as she considered the timing to be inappropriate. The guy immediately started cajoling and sweetly begging that there was nothing wrong with it. He persuades Karina to try out her skill and show how she skillfully uses it in practice. The plates of sweets are already empty. Karina closes her eyes and a large circle appears above her, similar to a radar that can detect monsters. The line moves inside the circle and thus activates the girl's skill. Suddenly, Nick reacted to something and his gaze changed from calm to scared. Asakura Daichi noticed this, but Karina seems to have discovered something with her skill, and the results don't seem to be comforting. Karina closed her eyes and bent over a little. She frantically asks the guy to wait because she felt someone's presence next to them. They need to be extremely careful not to get themselves into trouble. The guy suggested that there was some kind of monster next to them. Karina wasn't listening to anyone, she was just saying that it was something big and it could move. The girl thinks that it could be a man. The guy wonders what a person would do in such a dense forest. Suddenly, he realizes with horror that these may be bandits who can easily ruthlessly deal with them, well, or cause damage. Karina cannot determine the number of bandits who are somewhere nearby. Here, Alicia confidently says that there are about 8 bandits. Karina thanks the girl. She only apologizes in response. She says that this is only an approximate figure, and relying solely on it would be the wrong decision. However, this situation helped both Asakura and Karina not to reveal Nick's ability. Karina agrees with a smile. The guy understands that this is much better than Karina's wind magic because it may not be very accurate and you should not rely on it. Now they have more accurate information that will help them in their search. The guy guesses that Alicia is not as graceful as it seems at first glance. Now it's clear why Karina would like everything to remain a secret for as long as possible. After all, if you think about it that way, then it's not only Karina who's hiding information about Alicia, but also Klaus and Captain Jeffrey. The guy understands that now is far from the time for such thoughts. The guy is thinking about the number of bandits again. He asks the girls if they think there were fewer bandits last time. The guy even suggested that it was some kind of adventurer's party. However, Karina was already preparing to draw her sword from its scabbard. She doesn't deny the fact that it could be a coincidence. However, this is unlikely to be a coincidence, and the guys need to be prepared for anything. Karina puts gloves on her hands. With a serious expression on her face, she urges the guys to keep their distance until they discover the guys, no matter who they turn out to be. It was as if the table where the guys were sitting wasn't there at all. The girls and Asakura packed their things quickly and very quickly. They are walking through a forest among huge trees that cast huge shadows on the ground. In fact, Asakura Daichi has a skill that is very valuable in this world. Although he tries to avoid it, he can get absolutely anything he wants. As it turned out, a total of 8 opponents were discovered. If they are bandits, then the guy and Karina will be able to defeat them and protect Alicia. The guy asks Karina if they will hide. The girl explains that it is dangerous and asks the guy to sit quietly. After all, they don't know what kind of magic and skills the opponents have. On top of everything else, Nick smelled someone very strong. Suddenly, the kitten gets out of the guy's sweatshirt and looks ahead warily. The guy begins to guess that they are bandits after all, because Nick's reaction was not the most comforting. The guy definitely does not intend to spare those who destroyed the village. He is already fully prepared to use his entire arsenal of weapons that were in the vault so that the perpetrators would get what they deserved and would not be able to escape so easily. Karina says that things are getting worse and worse. The guy wonders what happened. The girl turns around and says that there are more opponents. Karina frowns and says that there are about 20 opponents. The guy understands that this is quite a lot. Asakura won't be able to use absolutely all the items in his world for defense. If these are really bandits, then their hideout must be close. If the guys can find him, then everything will be over once and for all. If they find the bandits' hideout, they will definitely be able to protect the villagers. Alicia turned to Karina. She wanted to offer something, but she immediately interrupted her and flatly refused. Karina urged the guys to return and report everything to Head Bertram and Captain Jeffrey. The guys are back. Captain Rad is sincerely glad that the guys came to him. He called Jeffrey to him. The man is most likely very happy to listen to the guy and his proposal, but he has no idea what Daichi wants to talk about. The man gets up from the table and asks the guys to wait a bit. Instead, he offers them tea as a courtesy to his guests. The man takes the kettle and is about to pour the tea into the mugs. The guy politely refuses. He asks about the opportunity to discuss something with the man before Captain Jeffrey arrives. Asakura is a little worried, but he is determined to see what he wants through, and he is not going to back down. The man immediately smiles sweetly, about to pour tea into the mugs. He asks the guy a question and lets him say whatever he wants. Klaus is ready to listen with all his attention and cordiality to Daichi, who wants to tell him something. Daichi loudly announced that he wanted to open a store in this village. The captain, shouting over him, repeated it with such force that the tent almost flew up. The guy covered his ears with his hands and noticed that even the villagers nearby probably heard the captain's voice. The captain was embarrassed and apologized. Daichi calmly placed the waterproof matches on the table. The man, looking at them in surprise, asked if he was really going to sell such goods and what kind of things they were. Immediately, Asakura Daichi lights one match, and it begins to burn brightly. He explains to the man that this phenomenon does not require magical power at all. Such a miracle causes a man to be surprised, and he immediately thought about one thing. The men are holding a match in their hands. He looks at the unknown object with great amazement and genuine curiosity. He realizes that this match can only be used once and asks the guy if this time is limited. The guy agrees with confidence. Daichi firmly decided that the product would be in high demand. He explains that he wanted to sell it to people who can't use magic. You can immediately see that the man was a little tense when he heard that the guy was going to sell all the goods to the general population. Captain Klaus asks how much such items will cost in his store. The guy explains that all these goods will cost 2 silver coins each. There are 2,000 Japanese yen, although in fact water-resistant matches cost only 1,000. The guy doesn't do charity, he does sales. The man waved approvingly. He understands everything. Captain Klaus asks about the price of the flint then. The guy replies that 60 grand will be worth a silver coin. The man was indignant and immediately slammed his hand on the table. He didn't understand why it would cost so much less than matches. Asakura explains that matches easily ignite a fire, besides they are water-resistant. The man suddenly turns around and goes to his locker. He addresses Karina. The man takes out some kind of incomprehensible device. It looks more like a stone with a heavy metal handle. He asked Karina to light a fire with this object. Karina hit a metal object on a stone, and several sparks immediately flew out of it, which ignited the paper lying on the plate. The paper begins to burn, and the smoke from it began to spread rapidly through the room. The guy understands everything. He wonders if it's difficult to light a fire without matches. Asakura Daichi understands that it will be possible to sell more flint if a resident is able to light a fire themselves with silicon and metal. Captain Klaus explains that it is worth selling the flint a little more expensive and asks Asakura Daichi's opinion on this idea. The man nevertheless decided to offer his opinion on the sale of these unusual goods, which do not require magic at all. Suddenly, he immediately remembers the sweet smiling face of that girl who did not know how to use magic at all. Daichi refuses the man because he is firmly convinced that he will sell flint for 1 silver coin. There was an awkward silence between the man and the guy. Daichi understands that you shouldn't even try to compete with a man because after all, it was worth expecting from the head of the Klaus company. The head of the company is Klaus the Golden Crane, who needs to be protected. Asakura even felt somewhat embarrassed by this situation. He wondered if the man would give the go-ahead for this business, which looked more like charity than trade. However, the guy is firmly pursuing his goals and is waiting for an answer from the head of Klaus. Head Klaus understands everything and strokes his mustache with his fingers. He says that since Mr. Asakura speaks in this way, he is not at all against this case. Now it seems that the man realized that he could not convince Daichi. The guy takes out more items, among which there is a rose figurine, a bag with something incomprehensible, and a lighter. The guy would like to sell some more products that the guys haven't seen yet. He says that these goods are for the rich and royalty. The man is very happy, and he asks what else the guy has in the assortment. Suddenly, Jeffrey's voice is heard at the entrance to the tent. He came back after an errand from Klaus. The guy asked to be patient a little bit, and then he will show the rest a little later. They immediately found a common language with the man and both agreed to these terms. Now the trade in unusual goods will definitely take place, and the guy will open his store. Jeffrey's head peeks out of the tent and he is invited inside. Klaus, when Jeffrey stood behind the guys, preventing them from leaving, asks them to tell them about what really happened in the forest and in the village. Klaus the head is full of seriousness, and Asakura, Alicia, and Karina were already thinking about how to answer the man's question. The village was attacked by bandits. Now everything there is teeming with robbers who mercilessly turn everything that gets in their way into a ruin and a pile of garbage. Meanwhile, a suspicious group is hiding in the forest. These shadows hide in the forest in order to reveal the truth. Chapter Klaus says that he has some suggestion. The man asks Jeffrey who this man is. Jeffrey says that they may be hunters or adventurers, but since the bandits attack the village, more and more bandits appear on the roads near the forest. The probability that these are the same bandits is very high. A suggestion was received from one of those present to deal with the danger in the same way as with the robbers. Jeffrey fully supports this suggestion. The man waits for the order and suggests that they all split up and explore the forest inside and out. After all, first of all, you need to make sure that there is no danger there. At this time, the guy is thinking about whether it will be possible to defeat the bandits with all this caravan and guards. Klaus says that of course he would like to organize the search, but he did not plan to divide the guys into groups. Jeffrey thinks Karina should have been involved in the search in the first place. Klaus realizes that it's not a bad idea at all and agrees. The guy immediately holds his hand up. He also wants to take part, arguing that there will be no problems with security in this case. Alicia wants to be a part of it too. Head Klaus points his finger at the guys. Since the guy and Alicia are guests of Klaus, he cannot put them in danger as this could damage his reputation. Klaus apologizes as he is simply forced to decline the guy's offer. Then Karina decided to turn to the chapter. She thinks Alicia and the guy's involvement in the search is a pretty good idea. Karina began to tell the head that Mr. Asakura had performed well last night in a fight with the Monkey King. But she chose to keep silent about what skill the guy used during the battle. Karina continues to say that in addition to unusual weapons, Asakura also showed mastery of high magic without attributes which has destructive power. These skills can cause tremendous damage. And Mrs. Alicia, according to Karina, also has enough experience to be able to avoid danger. Chapter Klaus turns to Karina and asks her opinion on whether the guests will survive the fight. Karina explains that Mr. Asakura has the most powerful firepower in the entire camp. The guy has simply excellent physical characteristics, and he will be able to escape from the enemy without any problems. Suddenly, Alicia enthusiastically holds up her hand. She says that she can fire a magic remote attack if needed. After these words, Klaus and Karina agreed that it was time to stop. Alicia, upset, suggested that Klaus would consider her a nuisance. Head Klaus claims that he doesn't think so at all, and Karina asked Alicia to leave all the fighting for protection. Alicia slowly lowers her palm down and looks at her sadly. Asakura begins to guess from the reactions of others that Alicia has a certain status. Perhaps she's from an aristocratic family. Head Klaus closes his eyes and gives the go-ahead to all the guys together. He instructs the boys to avoid fighting for as long as possible, because their safe return home is a top priority. Klaus says that Jeffrey will be on standby, and Karina will have to lead the search team, and he asks to leave the selection of the rest of the people to him. Now it is very important to choose the right people for this task. All the guys agreed and understood the instructions. The ashes of burnt paper burned out on the saucer and the smoke stretches high up. The guys are already moving out of the camp. Karina says that there are only 5 people in their search group. Karina is the captain of the squad, in which, in addition to Mrs. Alicia and Daichi, there are 2 other guys from the guard. The commander says that he will tell the other 2 people that Nick is an expert in magic without attributes. Asakura, without any exaggeration, believes that Karina can really be relied upon in this matter. The girl certainly has all the characteristics in sufficient quantity for this case. Karina sincerely thanks the guy. She says that some people still shouldn't know what abilities Asakura has and what level of magic he uses. Karina turns around and looks sweetly at the guy. She raises her hand to her chin and notices that people are very funny. Asakura was very confused by the girl's expression and her words. He decides to be a little more careful, considering Karina's comments. Karina looked thoughtful. She closed her eyes and said that it would be nice to disguise Asakura's unique skill in some way. The guy is perplexed to think that his skill is already disguised and nothing more will be needed for this. He says he'll think about it while he and the guys are on their way. Meanwhile, Karina continues to reflect and suggest various options. It is quite possible to use some kind of melee weapon. For example, a katana or something else. Karina calls Dennis and Frida. The 2 were standing nearby and later noticed the voice of a girl who called them and said that there was a certain job for them. Dennis turned to Karina with open incomprehension, calling her a lady, and asked what had happened. Frida noticed that Karina was very excited. She was also wondering what had happened. Frida and Dennis are 2 young people. The girl has her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and the guy has a rather unusual and memorable appearance. Karina explains that she felt the presence of a suspicious group of about 20 people in the forest. Karina asks Frida and Dennis to accompany her and the guys so that she can make sure she is right. Dennis strokes his stubbly cheek with his palm. It seems to him that such a search, especially at the present time and in 20 people, is unlikely to pay off. Frieda laughed meekly but sweetly. She noticed that her partner was simply unlucky with a lucrative job. The man apologizes to Frida and explains that his main principle is a convenient device and making money. Dennis really hopes for his partner's understanding. Asakura notes that the dialogue between Dennis and Frida is very witty. It is immediately clear that they are real professionals in their field. Karina tells Frida and Dennis that they will hear all the details on the way. Two new students ask about Asakura and Alicia. Karina begins her story. The guys continued their long journey. Karina says that she and Asakura will be in the vanguard. Alicia should be in the center of the squad. Dennis and Frida should bring up the rear of the group. Dennis calls out loudly to the guy. He was surprised that, despite the fact that people around him say that Mr. Asakura is an ordinary merchant, he also has combat skills. Asakura was surprised by the gesture. Daichi did not understand why the man did not hear his position. Still, the guy grinned and said that he was a little embarrassed to call it combat skills. In fact, the fight with the Monkey King last night was his second in a row. Suddenly, the man shouted loudly that defeating the royal monkeys in the second battle was an indication that he had talent. He slaps Asakura on the back as a sign of approval. The guy asked me to stop calling him Mister because he's not good at all these formalities. He asked me to just call him Asakura or Daichi. The man said that he understood everything and suggested calling him simply Daichi. The man put his arm around the guy's shoulder and set off on his way. Dennis had heard once that Daichi was going to the city to open a store there. The man is looking for confirmation of these rumors and asks Asakura about it. The guy confirms Dennis' guesses. He says that, despite the fact that this is his main goal, he still does not know whether he will stay there or not. Dennis considers Harem a good option for starting a trading business. It has a large population and is an important strategic point on the trade route that connects the capital and the port. Asakura is very happy with such useful information. He sincerely thanks the man for his help. Dennis suddenly offers to escort her to Karama Daichi. Dennis has his own vision of the situation. He hoped that when Daichi reached Takura village, he would start selling rare goods from abroad. Asakura understood everything now. In fact, he was only going to open a small kiosk after completing the search operation. Daichi says that he just wanted to try to trade items not from this country. Dennis was immediately surprised and asked the guy about the unusual car he was going to sell. Asakura Daichi explains that his product can allow you to light a fire. Dennis nods his head approvingly because he has already heard some rumors about these subjects, but the guy refuted his expectations. Daichi lights one of the waterproof matches again. The flame flares up abruptly, without taking long to wait. Dennis looks at this miracle with fascinated eyes and does not believe that such a thing can be done without using magic. Frida was also surprised by such an unusual trick. Karina turns to the guys and orders them to form a row. They are already approaching the place where Karina recently felt the presence of 8 people. They came closer to the forest. When the guys asked if Karina felt anything in this place, she shook her head negatively from side to side. Despite this, all the guys should not relax and remain vigilant. Dennis, in order to cheer up the guys, took a ridiculous lying position with his legs stretched up. He turned to Karina and noted that she was too restless and tried to assure everyone that he was always ready for a fight. Unfortunately, no one appreciated this maneuver of Dennis. Moreover, he did not inspire any confidence in this position. Asakura Daichi took a step forward. And when Nick suddenly gets out of his sweatshirt, the pet sensed someone's presence, and releasing sharp claws into the guy's sweatshirt, abruptly turned his head towards the source of his sensations. Asakura realizes that the opponents are 3 hours away from them. The guy thinks that if Nick discovered someone with the help of wind magic, then he should be more careful. Daichi wonders how to hint this to the rest of the guys. Suddenly, Alicia's voice is heard behind Asakura. The girl points her finger straight and says with a serious expression on her face that there are 3 people in the indicated direction after about 5 kilometers ahead. Asakura exhales with relief. He is glad that he did not have to puzzle over how to inform the guys about strangers. Daichi realizes that they are already very close and decides to take out their binoculars from their pocket. Dennis, with surprise and some misunderstanding, asks the guy what kind of object he is holding in his hands and wishes for his eyes. Daichi explains that these are binoculars with which you can see what is happening in the distance. The guy holds it out to Dennis and offers to look around through him too. The man immediately puts the binoculars to his eyes. He starts screaming in surprise because all the objects that were far away from him have become very close. At this time, Daichi turns to Karina and whispers to her that he saw something shining among the bushes with the help of binoculars. Daichi points to Dennis, who was still interested in exploring the world around him through a device that was new to him. The guy says that he was looking around and quite accidentally noticed the glitter. In fact, everything happened thanks to Nick's instinct. Karina closes her eyes. She is ready to give another order to her group. She reports that an unknown group is located less than 2 kilometers away from them. The guys don't know any details yet, so they need to expand their search area. Dennis looks through binoculars at Karina. He believes that extreme caution in a dangerous situation should be expected from Ms. Karina. Frida is also very proud of Karina and confirms the man's words with an approving nod. Karina turns to Alicia and says that she relies on her. The girl is full of determination. She is ready to follow the instructions of the captain of the squad. Physical improvement is triggered. Karina urges the guys to get ready for battle. Frieda and Dennis readied their shields. Karina asked Asakura Daichi to take out her shield too. Suddenly, Asakura delivers a huge shield that can easily cover his entire body. All the guys are surprised by such a huge and rather unusual size of the shield. Karina makes a comment because she thinks it would be much better to buy a simpler shield than this one. Alicia was even inspired. She believes that such a strong shield is an excellent solution because this way you can go ahead and swing in all directions. The guys are a little grounded. Alicia began to draw a terrain plan on the ground with a branch. She explains that there is a cave about 2 kilometers away from them. It is in this cave that there is an unknown group that consists of humans or similar beastmen. Alicia is horrified because she feels that there are definitely more than 50 people in an unknown group. There is even a possibility that there are more than 60 people in the group. The guys don't react the same way to what Alicia said. The girl says that this is all she managed to feel. However, it will be very difficult to find out more because the unknown group is located inside the cave. Dennis concludes that it looks more like an underground organization that does obscure things in a cave. Frida asked not to jump to conclusions, but still agreed that it looked very suspicious. Karina says that there is more than enough information from Alicia and showed her to move away. Asakura feels like she and the guys are acting too cautiously. After these words, Frieda and Dennis exchanged glances with each other. After a moment, they threw their heads back. Dennis, covering his eyes with his palm, says that there are beastmen in the group. And Frieda explains in the same manner that beastmen have a very good sense of smell, and perhaps it even reaches their location. Dennis says that the best thing they can do now is to step back and come back with more similar information. However, they should never allow anyone to return without even the slightest information. Frieda says that the fact that they have learned the approximate number of members of the group and found their refuge is already commendable. Frieda and Dennis burst into loud laughter. They believe that even for such a small amount of information, they can receive a special reward. Asakura Daichi scratched his cheek with a puzzled finger. He understood everything the guys wanted to convey to him. Dennis comes up behind Daichi and touches his shoulder with his palm. He asks the guy if he knows what is most important for security. Asakura suggests that the man tell him about it. Then Dennis, winking, talks about honesty. Asakura Daichi immediately recalls his speeches and stories that he is from abroad. He is on his way to relatives and paid in silver at home. The guy with the strained smile on his face thanks for the advice. Now he will know what the whole point is. Karina turns to Daichi and says that they are already leaving. Frida blows the guy a kiss, saying how much she loves honest guys. Asakura was a little embarrassed and blushed a little. Dennis immediately flies up to him and elbows him in the face with questions about whether the guy has fallen in love. The guy leaves the sensor at the trunk of one of the big trees before leaving. The guys came to the camp. Asakura couldn't believe his eyes. After all, before they left, the whole camp seemed to be bustling with life, and now there is only an empty field in its place. Karina says that all people have apparently moved to the ancient one. The camp members are gradually placing their belongings in a nearby village. Karina notices that the villagers are just watching the newcomer. The guy wonders where all the robbers have gone and what they will do if they suddenly return. Karina explains that she and the group have no goal at all to fight criminals, so everything should be in order. Dennis says that there are quite a lot of guards here who can prevent an attack, and the fighting strength of the guys in the group is at a sufficient level, so in any case, the victory is for them. Since an ambassador has already been sent to the Knight's Order with a notification, their task is to stay in the village and distract the enemy until the knights arrive. Now everything became much more than clear to Asakura Daichi. Dennis says they have a problem. The fact is that there were a lot more enemies than they expected. Frida suggests asking the villagers for help, but she's not sure if people will believe them. Karina looks towards the tent and thinks that everything should be reported first. Asakura begins to realize that this is how they are camping here and tells Karina about it. The girl responds by saying that, in fact, they have no other choice now. On the other hand, they can easily get support from the villagers. When Dennis asks what the village headman and others said, Karina says they need to find reinforcements. Frida remembers that this village has its own civil defense organization. Karina noted that it would be a good outcome if they joined their group. Dennis says that they have no choice if they are told that their village will be attacked. Karina turns to Dennis and Frida. She says that these two rest until the evening and can return to their usual work. Frida wonders what Mrs. Karina will do in this case. The girl says that she is going to show the main street of Daichi and Mrs. Alicia. Karina's calmness was immediately replaced by horror. After all, Frieda and Dennis had shouted about when their masters had addressed Mr. Asakura simply by his first name. Frieda and Dennis immediately began to guess some things. Karina held out her hands in front of her in denial, because everything is completely different from what the guys thought. The girl reminds everyone that Mr. Asakura just doesn't like formalities. Dennis notices that Karina didn't address Asakura like that during the assignment. Frida confirms and suggests that Mr. Karina may just be worried about the mission. Karina was burning with embarrassment. Dennis, noticing this, suggested that Karina might be hiding something from them. Karina loudly asked to stop teasing her. Dennis turns to the guy and asks for his opinion. Asakura is doubtful and says that Karina really behaved a little differently. Maybe she was really worried. In fact, Asakura Daichi was extremely unhappy, and deep down he wanted the guys to kill him. One small change in the conduct of Karina immediately becomes a reason for the mockery of these two. Frida immediately pounced on Karina with hugs and kisses, trying to lead her to women's conversations. She says that if Karina needs advice from her sister, she is always ready to help. Karina just refuses. Dennis also really wants to chat with the girls. Karina gets angry and pushes Frida away. She wants these jokes to stop faster. Frida turns to Asakura and, winking, asks if the guy thinks Karina is a cute girl. Asakura says that, without a doubt, Karina is very pretty when she is worried, but now, in the opinion of the guy, she is more cute. Daichi doesn't understand who is pulling his tongue to say such a thing. Karina immediately became confused. She does not believe the words she has heard. And Frieda and Dennis stood behind and, holding hands, were touched by such a confession. Asakura grabs Karina's hand and leads her away. The guy says goodbye to Frida and Dennis and tells them that he and Karina still need to open a store. Karina was embarrassed when she felt a touch on her hand. Frida and Dennis smiled kindly and wished Mrs. Karina to go ahead. Karina is angry and doesn't understand why the guys wish her luck when she and Asakura are just going to look at the store. The guys are already moving away from each other, and Frida and Dennis still want to have a good time. Karina thinks that the guys can't hear her at all. Karina and Asakura Daichi are quite in the village. They have 2 hours left. The guy suggests today just to see the reaction of the locals. Karina turns away from the guy and says that maybe there won't be any fuss, since there aren't many people on the street today. Alicia notices Karina's excitement and asks if she missed anything interesting. Karina roused herself and told the girl that she hadn't missed anything important. Alicia looks at Karina with a hypnotic gaze. She puts her hand on the girl's shoulder and claims that something definitely happened. Karina was embarrassed again and said that it wasn't anything serious. Karina, in order to distract Alicia's attention, suggested that they prepare for the store's opening because they only have 2 hours left, and in no case should they delay. Asakura waves her hand, trying to get the attention of Karina and Alicia. He wants to share something important or give them a signal so that they come closer and be aware of what is happening. A guy approaches an elderly woman who sells things and greets her. The woman asks the guy if he wants to buy something. Asakura declares that he wants to offer the woman some goods and asked her to take just a little time. The guy puts a large number of boxes of medium and small sizes on the table. The woman selling nearby really turned her attention. The woman sincerely praises the guy for having very good boxes. She talks about how she even envies Asakura Daichi. The woman finds it rather strange that as she gets older, she becomes more and more jealous of people with boxes. The girl next to her nodded her head sweetly and smiled. Asakura held out his hand to them and asked how the ladies lit the fire. The woman responds by lighting a fire with silicone. A girl nearby confirms what was said. The girl brings her palms to her cheeks and, exhaling heavily, says that, despite the fact that not everyone has a little magical power, all these magical artifacts are very expensive. Then Asakura smiled. Then he offers the girl and the woman to buy a cheap tool with which they can easily light a fire without using magic power. The woman couldn't hide her surprise. Then Daichi took out one of the matches from the package and asked the woman to give him her palm. With a confident movement, Asakura guided the hand of the woman who was holding the match along the box. A spark of fire immediately ignited and threw the girl and the woman into an incredible shock. The surrounding people immediately noticed this situation. Many could not understand what instrument had ignited the flame without using magical objects, looking at each other in surprise and trying to figure out the secret of this action. Karina and Alicia were glad that the product was starting to be in demand and gaining popularity. Asakura, with confidence in his voice, understood that his business was starting right now, And this was only the first step towards great success. Asakura spreads her arms to the sides, trying to calm the customers who have come. He urges them to remain calm, assuring them that he has enough matches for everyone and no one will be left without goods. The guy says that he distributes the lists in the order of the queue, so there is no point in pushing. People were crowding to the counter, trying to get an unusual product that would allow them to light a fire without magic. The girl received a box of matches, lit one of them, and was immensely surprised. She couldn't believe that she could now light a fire without using magic, feeling how this simple action was made possible by unusual matches. Asakura Daichi brings a large vat with wooden bars. He shows the girl the ignition with which the fire can easily spread to the firewood, but this thing is disposable. The girl nods her head in response. Asakura understands that she has not fully understood the principle of ignition. The guy asks for an opportunity to demonstrate how it works. Daichi lights a match and throws it into the firewood, which he doused with ignition. The flame spreads to all the tablets without missing any of them. Everyone around was amazed, because they had never seen anything like it. One of the men noticed how the flame spread insanely quickly and easily to the wood, surprised by the speed and power of this phenomenon. Asakura says that buyers have already noticed that it is possible to light a fire with matches, even without magic. And with the help of an incendiary, even the smallest flame can easily grow. And this means that you can use it to light any kind of firewood. The guy reminds me with a slight regret that his products have a small drawback. All items are disposable. Customers clearly reacted with disappointment to his words, and some even expressed dissatisfaction, realizing that the product could not be reused. Asakura, with a slight smile, announces that a box of 25 matches costs 2 silver coins. He focuses on the quality of the product, hoping that the price will be attractive to customers. And there are as many as 60 items in the incendiary box, which costs only 1 silver coin. The surrounding people were very surprised. Asakura recalls the words of the head of Klaus that the reaction of the residents would be exactly like that. The guy loudly and enthusiastically addresses the residents, asking if they will buy the goods. His voice is full of confidence and energy, and he waits with a smile for a reaction, ready to continue trading. A gloved hand suddenly rises in the crowd. A young girl with a determined expression on her face declares her desire to buy both products. All eyes turn to her, and she confidently waits for an answer. She pays for the goods with 3 silver coins, and Daichi gratefully thanks her for the purchase. He expresses his appreciation, hoping that the product will bring her satisfaction and she will come back again. Asakura asks the girl to stay for a while if she has some free time, because he wants to show her something else. The girl is surprised to ask Daichi if he really has any more goods. Asakura explains that this is not exactly a product, but most likely a small bonus for everyone. The guy thinks that it should definitely appeal to others. The girl agrees. The guy takes an object out of his bag and asks for the attention of others in order to show his small bonus. Asakura takes out a grate and puts it on a vat of burning wood. Others do not understand what the young merchant wants to do. Asakura immediately puts pieces of meat on a stick on the grill. The meat immediately began to emit a very pleasant and appetizing aroma. The people around him started asking the guy what kind of dish he wanted to cook. Daichi explains that he wants to cook a barbecue. Shish kebab is called small pieces of chicken, which are strung on a skewer and poured with sauce. One of the customers sees such a dish for the first time, despite the fact that he very often cooks fried chicken. The surrounding people were literally captivated by the smell that came from the grilled barbecue. As far as Daichi knows, the poor and unemployed usually eat only twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. The guy believes that he still managed to arouse the appetite of this part of the population. Asakura takes out 1 stick of cooked shish kebab. He calls the girl who first expressed a desire to buy the last 2 products and suggests that she try it first. Asakura explains that this is the bonus he mentioned earlier. The girl did not believe that it could be so easy to eat and join the meal. Everyone around her did not take their eyes off her and tried to follow every emotion of the girl. The eyes of the girl who tasted the barbecue increased in size because she had never tasted such delicious food. Asakura smiled with relief, glad that the girl and the villagers liked the barbecue. Meanwhile, the girl managed to eat everything she was given and, admiring the taste, asked what the sauce was made of and if it could be bought. The surrounding people, watching what was happening, involuntarily swallowed, their appetite increased, and they could not take their eyes off how everything was happening. The air around them was filled with anticipation, and everyone felt the desire to become a part of this scene. Everyone immediately rushed to the store with a request to buy any product in order to get the opportunity to taste the delicious dish. Some were interested in whether it was possible to buy only one product from the offered ones. Asakura loudly announces that he has a barbecue, and in order to try it, you don't have to buy something. Even if someone takes only one product, they will still receive their portion. Suddenly, everyone attacked the counter. Many people believed that if they bought 2 sets of goods, they were supposed to get 2 portions of barbecue. The guy sincerely asked to wait a little, because he did not have time at all with such an influx of customers. He took a couple of servings and approached the woman next to whom he opened his shop. Asakura politely bows his head and thanks the woman and the girl sitting next to him for allowing him to set up shop next to them. The guy also felt it necessary to apologize for the fact that he presented such inconveniences to them. The woman asks Asakura not to worry about it because they're going to close anyway. The guy gives them a large portion of shish kebab as a sign of gratitude. The girl and the woman sincerely thank the guy for the treat, smiling warmly. He responded with a light wave of his hand, looking after them, and then confidently headed back to his trade, ready to continue working. Asakura Daichi only had time to give orders. He was so tired that he didn't even really know what he was doing. Karina and Alicia were standing behind him and eating a barbecue. Meanwhile, the girl and the elderly woman left, saying goodbye to the guy at last. Asakura announces that his store is already planning to close, so if anyone still wants to purchase the product, they should not hesitate. Suddenly, adult men approach the counter from the side. They notice with some mockery that the guy's business is booming. They look with greed at how the guy turns off the entire trade in goods and are enviously willing to work as well. The guy understands that, most likely, they are just threatening in this way. Here the man asks if Asakura could give him some chicken for free. Asakura says with a slight smile that, unfortunately, everything has already been sold out, and there is absolutely no chicken left. He adds that demand was unexpectedly high and apologizes for the inconvenience. The men immediately got angry and started snapping and insulting the guy. One of them yelled that he had seen Asakura put the chicken he had just had in his bag. The guy bows to the waist and tells the men that the store is closing. He says that tomorrow he and his goods will be at the same place, and therefore men will be able to come and purchase the desired goods tomorrow. Men believe that such an attitude towards customers is simply unacceptable, and they think that they simply have to teach Asakura how to run a business properly. Suddenly, 2 of the newcomers approach the guy, but a sword blocks their path right in front of their noses. Karina stood between the men and Asakura. She glared at the intruders. One of the men pointed a finger at her and addressed her, assuring her that she had nothing to do with this case. The man thinks that she needs to move away, otherwise it will hurt. The man with the eye patch understands the complexity of the situation because in front of them is a magician in the class. On Karina's little finger are 2 key rings with the letters B and C. The men are stunned by such a meeting. And Asakura doesn't understand what's going on right now. Men treat Karina like a lady and ask her what she wants if she has nothing to do with it. Karina calmly explains that she is the guy's security detail. Her cold gaze, like a blade, pierces to the bone, causing men to involuntarily tense up. They sense her unyielding determination and invisible threat. One of the men frowns. He turns to Karina and asks her if she really thinks she can handle 4 grown-up and skilled people. The girl is grinning. She bends her head to her shoulder, thereby scaring men even more, and says that she should not be underestimated at all. Otherwise, you can feel very sorry. The men turned around, realizing that they would not be able to trick the guy and his guards. Having accepted the situation and learned that all the goods were sold out, they prepared to leave, taking one last appraising look at the guy and Karina. Then a voice is heard from the side, wondering what happened. As it turned out, a man with expressive features and a scar was sitting a little higher up. He asked what problems the men had. One of them was happy to recognize Alan and, visibly enlivened, admitted that he was surprised to see him here. He couldn't understand how his friend could have been in this place all this time. Alan says that he can help with the problems that the guys have. The man smiles slyly and says that he will be very grateful to Alan. The man turns to Karina with a mocking smile and asks if she has changed her mind about leaving the salesman boyfriend. He adds that people like him don't usually succeed, and he wonders how much longer she intends to put up with him. Karina, frowning slightly, looks at the man but does not hurry to answer. Karina looked at Asakura thoughtfully, as if waiting for him to make a decision. The latter, a little embarrassed, immediately began to apologize and explain that all the goods were sold out and there was nothing left in stock. The men burst out in rage, finding the treatment unacceptable and humiliating. Their patience had run out, and now they demanded only one thing: to meet with Asakura in order to deal with him properly and put everything in its place. Asakura covered his mouth with his hand and pretended that the men had misunderstood everything. Daichi mockingly says that he simply takes a group of men for fools. Then the men reached their limit and were extremely embittered. They unanimously decided that the merchant guy should make ends meet as soon as possible. There was a group of angry men on the street. One of them had a big scar all over his face. They were standing and looking at the guys, a dark-haired guy and a blonde girl. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail, and a flower was fixed in her hair. Another girl named Alicia Hartland was holding a cat in her arms, the owner of which was a dark-haired Daichi guy. The girl was in a cheerful mood, holding a Nick cat in her arms. She waved his paws. The man with the scar on his face, Alan, raised his hand up and closed his eyes, asked the guys why the guys were silent. The blonde man stood in front of the guys and turned to Alan. He said that the guys were wrong not to evaluate their strength. For this, they needed to punish them. The girl with the flower in her hair, Karina and Daichi, made faces at what they heard. Alan replied to the blonde man who suggested punishing the guys that Alan did not understand why the man had not already punished the guys himself. Alan assumes that the blonde man is simply afraid of Karina and Daichi. From what they heard, all the men in Alan's gang opened their mouths and started laughing loudly. The blonde-haired man began nervously pointing his finger at Karina and shouted loudly that he was just being cautious towards her, since she was a B-class magician. Karina stood with a calm expression on her face and looked at her hands. The men from Alan's gang and Alan himself, who couldn't hold back their laughter a moment ago, froze in place in the same positions they were laughing in, shocked by what they heard. A sinister grin appears on Alan's face and he says that he was inattentive. He could not have guessed who the guys were. Alan takes off from his seat. His hand reached for the weapon that hung on his belt. It was a sword. He headed towards Karinza and Daichi and said that not only Karina has the status of a magician here. The men from the gang echoed Alan's words. Alan and the other men, with smirks on their faces, from his gang took out their blades and headed towards the guys. They warned them about the upcoming battle. Karina and Daichi took up fighting positions. They were ready to attack. Karina told Daichi to be careful. Daichi said that two armed men were approaching them from the front and one from behind, who was most likely a magician. Armed men were heading towards Daichi. He thought that if it was about the ability to physically strengthen, then he would have no problems, but if they were able to use magic, then even bullets might not save him. Karina looks at Daichi and asks him if he can take on one of the attackers. Daichi looks back at her and says nothing. He was surprised by her words and thought that Karina had asked him for help for the first time. And helping such a beautiful girl as Karina only adds motivation to defeat these robbers. Daichi agrees to take on the two men and proceeds to attack. Daichi holds the other hand with one hand, in the valley of which a cloud of energy with sparkling waves appears. Daichi shouts to Karina that he is capable of defeating two men. Karina responds loudly that it will be enough to defeat one that is coming at them from the front. Alan ominously asked what the guys were discussing there. Men with swords in their hands continued to attack the guys. Daichi was waiting for their attack. There is a flash of light. After the flash of light, the bandits found themselves lying on the ground. Bleeding wounds formed on their bodies. They covered them with their hands. The blonde man and the rest of the gang were already kneeling in front of the guys with their heads down. Karina stood in front of the bandits with her arms crossed and waited for them to say at least some words. Daichi stood next to Karina and looked at her in surprise. Karina narrowed her eyes. She was addressing the blonde man who caused the brawl between the guys and the bandits. The blonde-haired man with a silly smile on his face replied that he had already forgotten what he wanted to say and clarified with the other bandits that maybe they remembered something and wanted to ask Karina a question. The other men waved nervously. They had no questions. Daichi walked ahead of Karina and squatted down in front of the blonde man. He had a question for him. Daichi thought he needed to gather more information. The blonde man was scared. He said that he was ready to answer any question Daichi was interested in. Daichi asked with a calm expression that the bandits had received a request to destroy the goblins. The man immediately agreed with Daichi's words. The man began to talk that he and his colleagues were adventurers who were registered in this city. He pointed at the other man with his finger and said that their squads had officially accepted the request. The blonde-haired man continued to say that the party of that magician, Alan, in his opinion, did not receive this permission. Alan was in a bad condition. He was breathing heavily. Daichi was still squatting on his haunches. He held his hand to his chin and looked thoughtfully at the blonde man. He asked how many goblins they had caught. The man did not give a specific figure. Daichi had an evil squint. He was interested in the specific number of captured goblins. The blonde man was scared and replied with horror in his eyes that his squad had caught 0 goblins. The second man, the leader of the other gang, was in the same horror. He said that his squad had also caught 0 goblins. Daichi thought about it. The leader of one of the gangs, who did not catch more than 1 goblin, began to point at the men who were wounded in battle. He said that 11 goblins were caught by these bandits, whom they later dealt with. One of the men who was overpowered by the guys continued to kneel on the ground. His hands were cut. After hearing the words about the massacre of the goblins and pointing at him and his gang, his expression took on fright and horror. Daichi bent over one of the defeated men. Daichi asked him a question about the goblins killed by him and other men from the gang. The man tensed at Daichi's question and answered his question in the affirmative. Daichi made a menacing expression, his eyes narrowed, and he asked the man to tell him about him and the rest of his squad. The man tensed up even more. He looked down and was silent. Daichi stretched out his hand to the wounded man, who remained silent to his question. Daichi abruptly turned away and asked the other man to tell him their names. A man with an eye patch and a mustache, Daichi addressed him. The man with the blindfold did not immediately realize that he was being addressed. Then Karina intervened. She said that the man with the blindfold should tell about the members of the wounded man's squad. The man with the bandage nervously spoke that the wounded man's squad consisted of 4 people in total. Then the man with the bandage pointed to one of the men with long hair who was part of the attacking squad. He had shoulder-length blonde hair. He was a water magician who uses healing magic. The man with the blindfold pointed out to the other 2 attackers that they were always ahead of the squad, as they could not use magic. These men sat on their knees and covered the wounds inflicted in battle with their hands. The man with the blindfold is the last to point at Alan. He also uses magic for combat purposes. He sat turned away from the rest of those present and did not utter a word. Daichi looked at the men defeated in battle and thought that they were a good team with the right balance of power. In this situation, it was not surprising that they defeated 11 goblins. But Daichi, looking at them, was still doubtful about something. Daichi got up and stood up to his full height. He raised one hand up and looking around, asked the people around him if everyone had received a request to destroy goblins in the village of Torno. A man with a blindfold and a mustache on his face raised one hand up and said that he and his squad had just received such a request, as well as a squad of defeated magicians. Daichi imagined the bloodthirsty monsters and asked the man with the blindfold what was the reason they had been able to prevent the goblins from attacking them all this time. The man replied that in the 10 days that they had been in the village, they had not seen any goblins. The man with the blindfold continued to say that it seemed that a group of magicians appeared in the village later, and just after their appearance, 3 days later, the goblins appeared. Daichi replied to the man with the blindfold that they were lucky that they had managed to leave the village before the goblins attacked. Otherwise, they could have been hurt. The man with the blindfold agrees with Daichi's words. Then Daichi turns away from the man with the blindfold towards the vulnerable men. His attention will be transferred by the water magician. Daichi has already addressed the defeated group of magicians. He asked them how they were able to defeat the goblins. Daichi was curious to know if this was true or not, and if it was true, how many goblins there were. The water mage said that as soon as they arrived at the village, they immediately headed into the forest to find any monster. The water mage recalled the forest and continued to say that they had been told by other squads that goblins had not appeared for more than 10 years. They thought that monsters might be hiding, so they went to look for them in the deep thicket of the forest. Daichi was wondering if the mage squad had managed to find the monster lair. The water mage closed his eyes and shook his head negatively. Daichi, looking at the water magician, thought about it and fell silent. Then he looked askance at Karina, and she also looked askance at Daichi, who was looking at her. Karina abruptly turned away. Daichi's hand was on his chin. After Karina turned away, he closed his eyes. Daichi called for silence and asked the men what to do with them in the future. Karina was standing nearby. She looked down at the ground. The weapons were piled in one pile. The guys discussed how to deal with the squads, hand them over to local governments, or if the squads think carefully about their behavior, the guys can let them go. A man from the detachments, from hearing the words about liberation, all formed and made a noise in chorus. Karina was annoyed by the noise. Daichi was slightly surprised by what was happening. Karina turned away from the cheering crowd and said that they had to go. They needed to tell Klaus and Jeffrey everything. Daichi was standing with his eyes closed and Alicia was standing next to him. In her arms was a cat named Nick. Daichi looked suspiciously at the water mage, who sat silently with his head down on the ground. Daichi couldn't take his eyes off the magician and thought that the words of this water magician might be true. Since their squad consisted of magicians, they could defeat the goblins and also go to the bowl of the forest in search of them, so it seemed to him. Daichi was already moving away from the water mage and continued to think that Daichi still seemed strange and dubious in the magician's story. Daichi was very worried about it. Even walking with his back to the water magician, Daichi's gaze was directed in his direction. He thought that this magician still did not look like a person who could easily tell everything. The magician looked up. His gaze was directed at Daichi, who was walking away. Karina walked through the campsite, following an elderly man surrounded by tents and lighted torches. My husband said that before the village of Torno was attacked by bandits, there were 2 squads that hunted goblins. Karina came to the head of the company with new information. The elderly man glanced at Karina, turned around a little, and asked her what she felt when she was there. An elderly man entered one of the tents of the camp. Karina lifted the fabric of the tent entrance, followed him. She said that a group of 4 magicians has a very black aura. She would not trust them, as well as other adventurers. An elderly man put his hand on the wooden back of a chair, began to push it away, and asked Karina for her opinion on the agreement between the bandits. Karina cautiously replied that she and the others should act with caution. The elderly man sat down on the chair he had moved earlier. An elderly man sat down at a table with a small lamp on it. He scratched the beard on his face and asked that Daichi really found out all this himself. Karina was standing in front of an elderly man. Karina remembers a cheerful Daichi who greeted everyone. Karina and an elderly man discussing Daichi's act when he organized a kiosk to sell goods. Karina thought that Daichi's idea was related to the incident in the village of Torno. The elderly man put his hands on the table and rested his chin on his hands. He said that he planned to send his people from the bar tonight so that they would find out more information. This should not be placed by Daichi. Karina bit her lip out of anger and immediately bowed down in front of the elderly man. Her eyes were closed, then she apologized. An elderly man took the cup and decanter in his hands. Then she said that really Daichi really tried to contact the squad under the pretext of organizing a kiosk. Not a man, not anyone else, could not even imagine it. An elderly man looked up at Karina and asked if the adventurers had noticed it. These actions looked very suspicious. They recall the events of the interrogation of Daichi bandits. The elderly man says that he is not afraid of bandits attacking the village. He is afraid if bandits attack his caravan on the way. Karina silently listened to the elderly man and looked at him. He said that it was not worth going deeper into their problems. The elderly man closed his eyes and continued to sit at the table. Then the older man looked up at Karina again. His hand came close to his face, and he asked her opinion about Daichi. Karina replied with a serious face that Daichi had boundless conscientiousness. Karina remembers Daichi's back moving away from her and says that Daichi, in addition to magic, is wise. He has great knowledge, and without a doubt he has a higher level of education than Karina. An elderly man was shifting coins on the table and listening to Karina. She said that he could do calculations in his mind without paper and pen. He did it quickly and without mistakes. The elderly man brought a glass of liquid to his lips and said that he, too, had noticed Daichi's skill in calculating. He noticed that not even every experienced merchant can count in his head and sign contracts so quickly. Karina recalled how she and Daichi were in the forest. She wanted to practice attack magic, and Daichi undertook to calculate the distance of defeat according to the formula. She was very surprised. After her story, the elderly man was no less surprised by what he heard. The elderly man frowned and put his hand to his face and asked Karina if she remembered what this calculation formula looked like, which Daichi did. Karina shook her head negatively to the sides. Kaina looked at the man and replied that she did not understand such a thing, and moreover would not be able to remember it. Karina thought about it, and images of Daichi began to pop up in front of her when he was doing calculations. She thought Daichi had used complicated calculations, but they were approximate. In her eyes, Daichi looked like a university professor. Then Karina remembered that when Daichi was tired of doing calculations, he took out a measuring device and he calculated the distance using this strange thing pointed at a tree. The man listened to her in surprise. The elderly man brought his glass close to his face and said that Daichi, when he was in his homeland, belonged to the royal family or had aristocratic blood in his blood. Karina held her hands behind her back and interrupted the man, saying that Daichi could be a rich and peaceful heir to a noble family, or he could be a spoiled son. The elderly man pressed his glass to his lips, drank from it, and asked Karina in surprise why she thought so about Daichi. Karina's face took on a strange expression, her eyes narrowed, and she said that Daichi treats everything lightly. Karina's eyes narrowed even more, her eyebrows furrowed, and she said that she did not think that Daichi could solve problems, since all the troubles that surrounded him were solved by other people. Karina recalled how Daichi performed on stage, which he did in front of him was Alicia. Her face looked very pleased. Karina finished her story. She stood motionless, her hair barely moving. The elderly man put the cup on the table. Karina suggested strengthening the response level for Daichi. The older man was surprised and interested in Karina's proposal. Karina, with a serious face, said that it was necessary to establish surveillance of Daichi to the same extent as secret royal aristocrats or heirs. The elderly man closed his fists, his fingers intertwined. He was interested in the reason for such an offer from Karina. Karina looked at the man and raised one hand in front of her. She said that even for their country Daichi is too dangerous. He owns first-class magic without attributes, and in his bag there are many curiosities that they have not seen. A high dome of a scarf stretched over Karina's head. She continued to say that, in addition to everything else, Daichi has a high level of education. He can find a way out of any situation using the environment and other people. Karina remembers the image of Daichi. His hand was pointing forward. A cluster of magic was forming in his hand. There were various attributes around him, a machine gun, a light bulb, a mobile phone, and so on. Thus, he can take control of the country. Karina's face changed. It became anxious. Drops of sweat trickled down her cheek. She closed her eyes and thought. Kaina clasped her hands behind her back and began to say that if Daichi could turn out to be the ruler of a more magically advanced country. Karina's face looked wary again. She narrowed her gaze and said that Daichi's influence in their country might be too strong. After listening to Karina, the elderly man pressed his hand to his face and sighed heavily. The elderly man furrowed his brows. He menacingly said that Karina was the daughter of Count Krusha, who belonged to the royal faction, and she intended to defeat Daichi in any way she liked. Realizing the man's words, Karina frowned, her face distorted with anger, and shouting something, she took a step towards him. The atmosphere in the tent was heavy. She stopped at the table and leaned on it with her hands while the man stared at her motionlessly. Then he spread his hands to the side and smilingly told her that all his words were just a joke. Karina's eyes were filled with anger, her eyebrows were furrowed. She said that due to the current situation in the kingdom of Gendorf, this joke could be deadly for an elderly man. The elderly man looked away and scratched his nose. He replied that if you do not take into account the high status of Daichi in his homeland, for his goods and knowledge, two opposing factions can start fighting for Daichi. Karina put her hands down and said that the faction that would take his side would have more influence. Then Karina took her hands behind her back. There was a dark castle behind her back, and she continued to say that the most disturbing thing was that Daichi could be led away in another direction. The elderly man rubbed his mustache thoughtfully with his hands. Rolling it over, he looked menacingly at Karina. He said that they needed to do everything possible to prevent Daichi from leaving for another country. A group of guys were walking through the city. There were houses and tall trees around them. Daichi was walking behind all the guys with a sword behind him. Daichi threw his arms behind his back and asked the guys in surprise why they had gathered in such a group. One of his companions, a dark-haired girl, turns to Daichi. Her hair is tied up in a high ponytail. Her hands were wearing gloves. A girl with a smile on her face asked Daichi why he didn't like her company. The girl with the ponytail approached Daichi's face and with a smile on her face asked if it would be better to have a companion like her in the team. Daichi sheepishly agreed with her words. The girl with a smile on her face pointed her hand at the short-haired man, Denny's, and said that if Daichi did not like Denny's, then she could scold him and in general, you can take some girl to the team instead of him. Denny's crossed his arms and was angry. The girl with the ponytail continued to say that instead of a middle-aged man, it's better to have beautiful girls on the team. They introduced three smiling girls, one dark-haired, the other in uniform. The third had a helmet on her head. Daichi's face turned red. He nervously scratched his cheek and rejected the offer with the girls in the team. His cat Nick looked out of his shirt, and Alicia was smiling behind him. The girl with the ponytail looked towards Denny's with a confused look. Her face flushed slightly, and she said that he was very lucky that Daichi agreed to keep him on the team. Denny's was speechless. He blushed with embarrassment. Karina turned to the guys a little and said that they all had to stick to the plan. They had to ambush the bandits. Karina turned her head completely to Daichi and told him that Denny's and Frida were B-rank magicians. Both of them could fight both melee and ranged combat. Daichi walked beside him. The roofs of wooden houses flashed by him. He thought about the fact that magicians in the rank are as strong as Karina. Daichi looked at Denayas and Frida and thought that Karina specializes in wind magic. If the guys have good attacking skills such as fire magic, then they can be stronger than Karina. Daichi praised the guys. They were surprised by his words. After a moment, Denny's broke into a smile. He scratched his prickly chin. He was flattered by the words of praise from Daichi. Frine blushed and said with a smile, "The entire Bertram Company's security consists of magicians above the D category, and therefore she does not feel any special." Daichi and the guys were still outside. He turned to them and said that he didn't fully understand. He had heard about Bertram's guards that they were very strong. Next to the guys were other people who lived in the wooden houses surrounding them. The children were having fun on the street. Denny's cheerfully said that they were known in the world as an ordinary security company. Karina was walking in front of the guys and started saying, without turning to them, that when it comes to battle, Denny's is becoming a pro at mass-type attacking magic, which can make the enemy afraid. The guys followed and listened to Karina. Daichi was tired, he closed his eyes, everything was dark, rays of light were coming from him. Daichi thought he was starting to think about running away from the guys. Frida said that this was the most effective way, and Denise replied that she could not doubt it. Karina stopped at one of the buildings and fixed her gaze on a barrel hanging on a chain. The guys stopped not far from Karina. There was a barrel hanging on a chain on the corner of the house with a sign indicating a bar. Karina told everyone to stop talking. Daichi looked up in surprise, and a Nick cat came out from under his shirt in the neck area and growled angrily. Daichi looked at the cat nervously. He was curious about the reason for the cat's angry reaction. Alicia went up to Daichi and the cat and began to move her finger in front of the cat's face. She was also interested in the cat's reaction. The cat did not pay attention to anything. He continued to get angry and meow loudly. Daichi thought that maybe Nick had smelled bandits in the bar with the help of spirit magic. Daichi told the guys that there might be bandits in this bar. Daichi, Karina, and Nick's cat were talking. Karina asked Daichi what he understood about bandits from the cat's reaction. Daichi, winking with one eye, agreed with Karina's words. Karina smiled, she raised her hand in the air, and she said that at this rate she would easily cope with this task if they found bandits in the bar. Denny's was the first to enter the bar, followed by the rest of the guys. The guys had a view of a small establishment with a staircase to the second floor. On the first floor there were several tables where men were drinking from large mugs. Some of them were clinking mugs, and there were plates of various kinds of food on the tables. The guys went inside, Denny's looked around and licked his lips, Karina went second, Daichi tried to do everything but he was in the restaurant, the others were behind. Karina was intently examining the establishment and something on the side caught her attention. She scratched her head, squinting one eye, and said that she had found the ones they were looking for. Daichi looked at her in surprise and stood behind her. In front of the guys are men whom they had already defeated earlier. They were sitting at a table next to the stairs leading to the second floor. There were 4 of them. They drank from large mugs and ate food. A girl in a headscarf and an apron walked next to them. Alicia came up to Daichi and said that he was doing well. Frida covered her yawning mouth with her hand and said that it was a good job. Daichi looked at the leg of one of the bandits sitting at the table. There was a hole in his pants and the wound was missing. Daichi said that this bandit had already been healed. The guys remembered the dark-haired wounded bandit who was lying on the ground. Karina said that there was a magician with those bandits who used Vola magic. For him such an injury, he could heal it in a couple of minutes. Daichi introduced the 2 wounded men he had drawn. He kept his hand on his chin and said it would take a couple of minutes. Karina replied that the wounds she inflicted could heal within 3 minutes. Daichi turned to Karina and said that he thought they would just come to the bar and pretend to be drinking customers. Karina closed her eyes and lowered her head. She said that this was no longer necessary. Denny's got upset and squatted down with a gloomy look. He said that he really wanted a drink. Frida, with a smile on her face, patted the dejected Denny's on the back with her hand and said that they could buy some alcohol and could wait for them outside. Denny's took a large jug from an elderly mustachioed man, and Karina and a man in a dark hood were standing next to the cart on the street. 4 men, whom the guys were waiting for, left the bar and walked away. Karina watched the bandits walking away from the corner and said that the bandits had left the village. Denny's and Alicia approached Karina. Denny's asked what the bandits were heading towards the forest for at such a time of day. The guys continued to follow the men moving away from them. Someone said that they did not need to go into the forest to contact their own. Denny's and Alicia Karina were looking around the corner, and Karina said that most likely the bandits' contact was hiding somewhere in the forest. They went to him to deliver a letter with information about the situation in the village. Denny's rubbed his nose with his finger and said with a grin on his face that Bertram's guards were smarter than he could have imagined. 4 men were walking through the dark forest. One of them had a large sword on his back. One of the guys said that if the adventurers do not cope with the task or something does not go according to plan, they make a request for reinforcements. The guys are hiding in the bushes, Karina is in front, the others are behind, they look around. At some point, Alicia's eyes notice something. Alicia says sharply and warily that someone is hiding in the grass. Denny's and Karina turn to Alicia. Alicia and the guys take off, they were wary and moved through the forest. Alicia calls everyone to follow her. The guys see a piece of land with grass growing on it. Alicia and the other guys were hiding in the grass. Alicia said it wasn't good. Daichi stared in surprise, wondering what was going on in the distance. Alicia, with a serious face, said that if you believe the conversation of the bandits, then one of the vigilantes is sharing information with them. Denny said, squatting down, that when the adventurers gathered to hunt monsters, it was normal for the wave to get information from the locals. Frida was sitting next to me and said that there are many gaps in the knowledge of local residents. Daichi turned to Denny's, he was wondering how strong the monster hunters were. Denny's replied that goblins cause a lot of problems when they gather in packs, but they are quite stupid. Their numbers help them defeat someone. Frida said with a smile on her face that the territory was being explored in parallel with the hunt. Daichi became wary and thought that his guess turned out to be true, that if the monsters turned out to be stronger than the goblins or there were abnormally many of them, then more armed forces would have to be sent here. Daichi placed goblin puppets with weapons in their paws. He continued to reflect that the number of goblins that threatened the village did not exceed the number of people who could defeat them. Daichi began to understand the plan of attack on Torin. It consisted of visual images and descriptions of how bandits had set goblins on the villagers. The villagers had turned to the guild for protection, and bandits were mixing with adventurers to find out if the bandits could defeat the villagers. Alicia turned to the guys and said that the bandits were not interested in the whole village. They needed to defeat Bertram's company and rob the village from the opposite side. Daichi thought that the plan of robbing half the village and not getting caught by Bertram's company, this plan looked too suspicious. The bandits were standing in the middle of the field where they met with another group of men. Kaina said that the bandits really didn't know about the possible ambush. Alicia replied that the bandits were all on the lookout. Karina sat on her knees and said that if Alicia could do something so that everyone could hear what the bandits were talking about. Alicia agreed to try and closed her eyes. Then Daichi heard the voice of one of the bandits. He was surprised to hear someone's voices. Daichi kept hearing voices saying that Bertram's caravan was in town and the vigilantes were acting suspiciously. Daichi was shocked by Alicia's ability. Karina said that Alicia used wind magic, and therefore the guys can hear what the bandits are talking about. One of the bandits said that the vigilantes had forgotten in the village. One team of bandits was talking to another. The bandit with the scar on his face said that they were interested in the case of the village of Torin. The others were surprised to hear his words. Daichi and the rest of the guys continued to sit in the grass and listen to the bandits' negotiations. One of the bandits said that this is the same village that was robbed last time. The other bandits agreed with his words. The dark-haired bandit with the hump on his nose said that you killed everyone that time. Daichi's face changed. It became stern from the words he heard. Another bandit replied that after the incident with the village, Bertram's group still hadn't moved. The bandit with the hump in his face replied that it was too early to confirm this, and the bandit standing next to him asked what they would do next. Frida and Denny's strained their ears and narrowed their eyes. The bandit said that they were lucky that Bertram's company had gathered here. The bandit with the crooked nose said that this time they would hit the jackpot, much more than they had in that village. The guys crouched down and continued to watch and listen to the bandits' negotiations. They rejoiced and reassured each other. The bandit with the scar on his face recalled the meeting with Daichi and Kaina in which they were defeated. He tensed up and said that he had already said that the guards were very dangerous. The bandit with the crooked nose said that only 2 of the guards know how to fight. The bandit with the scar on his face replied that even the fact that there were only 2 of them didn't make them any less dangerous. The rest of the bandits stood and remained silent. A bandit with a crooked nose and a smirk on his face said that one of the guards was a B-class magician. Then he reassured the others and said that everything would be fine. Since the 5 magicians in Randa are already here too. 5 dark silhouettes stood nearby. Hearing this, Daichi, along with the cat that came out of his bosom, and the rest of the guys were very surprised. Daichi was scared and thought that these bandits were on the same level as them. Karina frowned and said it wouldn't be easy. Karina told the guys that she had gone to report on those bandits. Daichi with a cat in his bosom and Alicia were standing behind Karina and smiling stupidly. Someone called Daichi and he was startled. It was Alicia, and with a smile on her face she asked Daichi to tell her about his parents. The girl screamed that Daichi owned such revolutionary theologies, these world-class inventions. Daichi stood next to her and was confused. She scared him. He nervously agreed with her words. Daichi had a confused face. He was thinking whether it was worth telling the truth to Alicia. Daichi himself did not know everything about these technologies, and these were not technologies but simple goods. Daichi crossed his arms and thought that he needed to come up with something. He needed to tell Alicia something else so that she would get distracted and forget about her question. At that moment, the kitten started yawning and Daichi had an idea. Daichi said he had information for her. Alicia looked at Daichi and was delighted by his words. Daichi shouted that cats are very popular in Daichi's homeland. Daichi pointed with his finger, the cat pricked up his ears, and Alicia opened her mouth in surprise. Daichi and Alicia continued to discuss the popularity of cats in the country where Daichi was from. The kitten sat next to the guys and watched them. Alicia said that she also loves cats very much and therefore can understand their popularity, but here, where the guys are, cats are less popular. Daichi countered that cats are mega popular. Alicia followed Daichi's lead. Daichi presented the image of a man who bows to a cat and recalled the presence of a cafe. He told Alicia that every 10th inhabitant of his country has a cat at home, and in his country there are different cafes in which cats are praised. Daichi remembered social networks where you can upload photos of cats that collect a lot of likes. Daichi explained to Alicia how it worked, that if a picture of a cat was sent out, it could spread for miles ahead. Daichi shouted that in his country there are various attributes for cats and many items were in the form of cats. He remembered cat houses and t-shirts with their images. Alicia was shocked by Daichi's story. She was overwhelmed with delight. She could not believe that objects could be in the form of cats. In delight, she crossed her arms over her chest in the area of her heart. Alicia enthusiastically said that she understood the essence of cat products, but did not understand one thing: why to give ordinary objects the outlines of cats. Daichi laughed and started rummaging in his bag. There was a handkerchief behind him and a small torch was burning. Daichi took out of his bag slippers, a watch and a mug with ears, tail and muzzle of seals depicted on them or having their outlines. Daichi said that after taking one look, you won't be able to resist anymore. From what she saw, Alicia cringed with delight. She clenched her teeth and blushed. She could only say one word: that it was very cute. Daichi continued to talk about objects similar to cats, that there are plates, pillows, adapters in the form of cats. To every word she said, Alicia replied that it was very sweet, but she didn't know what an adapter was, but for her everything was exactly sweet. Alicia fell to the ground in delight, and as she got up from the ground she said that she understood what Daichi meant, that cats were meant to be cute. Alicia got to her feet a little, she could barely stand. She said that she could not expect less from the Daichi homeland. They develop not only technology but also simple household items. Daichi stood to the side and smiled. Alicia lowered her head to the bottom, tears poured from her eyes. She screamed that she should make tools in the shape of cats. She had always aspired to create magical tools. Such ideas had never occurred to her. Daichi put his hand on Alicia's bare shoulder. He tried to calm her down and told her not to worry. Alicia was on her knees. Daichi got down on one knee and continued to hold Alicia's shoulder. He said that she should not imitate this, since new ideas may not visit her. As a creator, she is not inferior to the creators and inventors from Daichi's homeland. Daichi became distraught and abruptly began shouting that at the moment Alicia had lost, that this was a complete failure. The cat sat next to him and scratched his muzzle with his paw. Alicia looked at Daichi enthusiastically. He continued to shout that now she needed to enjoy the cats. Daichi held Alicia behind his back and opened a tall door in front of her, from the opening of which dazzling rays burst out. He said that she only needed to open the door to a new world. Alicia looked at Daichi and enthusiastically shouted that she would do it. Alicia approached Daichi and said that Daichi needed to teach her. Daichi cheerfully replied that he would teach her, she just needed to rely on him. Daichi thought that it was difficult to deceive Alicia, he was even a little tired of it. Daichi continued to tell Alicia about the attributes associated with cats. He showed her the soft paw of a cat. Alicia didn't understand what kind of object it was. Daichi replied that it was a device that you could always use to crush a soft cat's paw. Next, Daichi showed a cat carrier. Alicia saw this object for the first time. Then he showed the cat in the carrier. Alicia covered her mouth with her hand in delight. She recognized the cat in the carrier. It was Nick. The cat got out of their carrier. She was wearing clothes with bells. Achilles did not understand why the cat was so cute. The cat bent his paws a little and put his head on them. There were wings on his back, then he turned backwards. A robot cat appeared with a tray in one paw on which there was a drink, and Nick the cat sat next to it and looked at the robot. The robot cat greeted everyone. Daichi said technology plus cats. Alicia waved her hands and said that Daichi needed to show her more items related to cats. Daichi shouted that in that case we were moving on. Alicia has ears, paws of seals, and clothes have also changed. Daichi began to shout that Alicia needs to feel like a cat and become cute. Alicia panicked and joined the game. Daichi told her that she needed to start meowing. Alicia covered her mouth with gloves in the shape of paws on her hands and said it was too embarrassing. Daichi's eyes and face looked like a cat's, and he told Alicia to say meow at the end of the app. Alicia was twitching her gloved hands in the shape of cat paws, her mouth opened wide. And she meowed, she arched like a cat does. Daichi enthusiastically said that Alicia was doing well, she was very sweet. Alicia was sitting on her lap. Alicia had a tail and paws on her feet. She put her hands to her face and continued to meow. Daichi continued to praise her. Then Alicia changed into pajamas in the form of a cat. She was wearing a one-piece jumpsuit with a hood on which there were ears. She continued to meow. Daichi looked at her and cried with delight and emotion. Daichi was delighted. He started shouting that Alicia was doing well and they needed to continue doing this. A serious Karina appears behind the enthusiastic Daichi. She is shocked by what is happening. Daichi and the guys were sitting in ambush and eavesdropping on the bandits' conversation. Daichi thought that the 5 bandits were B-rank magicians. The bandit with the hump on his nose was smiling, and his 2 bandit assistants were standing next to him. One was taller, the other much shorter. Daichi looked at them and thought that's why they looked so confident. The bandit with the scar on his face said that he had personally fought with the guards and he had something to say about it. The 3 bandits stood behind the man with the scar on his face. The man with the scar on his face said that they had better wait until the guards left here. Daichi was surprised to hear the bandits' words. The leader of the gang of 3 people laughingly asked if the man with the ball was afraid of the guards. He replied that yes, he was afraid of them. The man with the hooked nose was surprised by the truthful answer. The man with the scar said that the girl was also dangerous, but at least he understands how she defeated them, but he has no idea how the guy did it. The image of Daichi surfaced in front of him. The man with the scar frowned and said that the only thing he understood was that Daichi had charged him with a piece of lead right on his leg. The man with the hooked nose scratched his face and said it was probably earth magic. The bandit remembered the images of Karin and Daichi and said that if it had been a magic projectile, then his magic armor would not have allowed him to break through. The man continued that the guy used anything but a magic spell. One of the bandits started shouting that in that fight 2 of his colleagues had their legs blown off. It was the hands of that guy. The other man replied that it was their own fault that they had lost their vigilance. Denny's began to assume that the bandits who appeared in the village were just 6. Frida sat next to him and thought about his words. The man with the scar on his face said that he was wasting his time. He shuffled his feet and continued to say that it was necessary to tell everything to the guys in the village. The 3 men turned away and began to leave. The latter said that the final decision would be made tomorrow, said to pray to the other bandits so that the raid would be cancelled. The man agreed, and then I heard some noise. He turned around. Karina told the guys that they had to go. The crowns of the trees were planted, and then the gorge in the cliff appeared. There were a lot of bandits in the gorge. They surrounded a lot of barrels building near one of the walls. The bandits all looked at one point at once. Among them was a one-eyed cat in human height. The man with the crooked nose said that Elaine and his team took the task too lightly. They fought with a girl from the guards and some guy who defeated them. One man from the crowd asked if he was sure that one of the guards was a B-rank magician. He was a sturdy blonde man with a small beard. He crossed his arms and waited for an answer to his question. The man replied that there was only one magician there, and it was a girl who had a badge of the Guild of Magicians. Another dark-haired man asked if the guy they met was definitely stronger than the magician in the rank. The man with the hooked nose said that Elaine had also noticed the boy, and it seemed to him that the boy was much stronger than it might seem. The men exchanged glances and began to discuss further actions that they intend to take. The hooded man said that if these guys were from Bertram's company, they would cause them a lot of trouble. The 3 men are building in silence and thinking about what is happening. Many bandits stood and listened to the negotiations. One of them said that there were enough of them to defeat these guys. The other men started talking and doubting their abilities. They were worried that the guys were magicians in the rank. A dark-haired man with a beard said that they should not forget about themselves and threaten the others. A blonde man with a beard shouted that everyone should be silent. The dark-haired man and the man with the scar turned at the shout. There was a young guy sitting behind all the men. He spoke with a cheerful grin that if the vigilantes moved, it did not mean that Bertram's company would lend them a helping hand. The guy winked at one of the men. It was a blonde man with a beard who asked everyone to shut up. He asked that this guy had already managed to prepare a trap for those guys. The guy's name was Pete. He was sitting on the floor leaning on one of the barrels. He said that the head of Bertram's company was going with the caravan. Pete suggested setting traps for the vigilantes in advance and gave the task to lure them there. The blonde man crossed his arms and said that the vigilantes were standing guard at the north gate, and Bertram's caravan had stopped at the south gate. The other men stood silently and listened to him. The man with the hooked nose said that it was all right. Alan had told them that. Pete introduced the attacking men and said with a smile on his face that if they attacked from the north gate, Bertram's company would rush to their aid. The men were discussing what they should do next. They wanted to take everything they could before reinforcements arrived or deal with the vigilantes. Since there would be little of value there, Pete looked at them in surprise. The men began to discuss that in this village, unlike in the past, there are many young girls with whom to have fun. The buzz of discussion did not stop. The blonde man was serious. He thought that nothing would work out between them. The blonde man was lost in thought. He thought that the plan was not perfect. There were many nuances in it. He thought about the obstacles that might arise and the solutions. The men continued to make noise. They were considering an attack on Bertram's company and the riches they would be able to get, which were stored in their wagons. A dark-haired man with a beard growled that in no case could the filling for Bertram's company happen. They were too strong. The bandits, after hearing the words, drooped in thought. Pete rubbed his chin with his finger and said that a magician of the rank could be a big problem for them. The blonde man asked Pete what he thought about the whole situation. Pete remembered Alan's face. He said that Alan was too scared, so his opinion should not be taken into account. Pete got to his feet and spread his arms. He said that any of Bertram's team is an excellent fighter. In order to minimize damage, you need to avoid a direct collision with them. Pete's mouth opened slightly, and he stuck out his tongue and put his hand to his chin. Then he said that they needed to organize a surprise attack. The blonde man looked at Pete in surprise and asked how Pete was going to pull this off. Pete continued to stand with his arms outstretched to the side. All the bandits stood and looked at him. Pete joined his hands together. A big smile appeared on his face. He said that they would easily defeat the North Gate warriors. The bandits looked at each other and rejoiced. Pete narrowed his eyes and continued to say that they would be able to defeat the vigilantes if they went to Ram. Pete introduced the little men he had drawn and said that if the vigilantes focused on defense, they would defeat them quickly. Pete said that if the vigilantes would only defend themselves, they could just start looting the village. The bandits raised their fists or weapons in the air. They rejoiced at the coming victory. Pete closed his eyes and smiled. He thought that the opponent would act as it suits you. Pete stood with his arms outstretched to the side. He said that the vigilantes were not fools. Most likely they would gather all the residents together to protect them in the first place. They could be gathered in the center of the village. The man with curly hair said that if they got rid of the vigilantes, then people from Bertram's company who stayed in the village itself would come in their place. The hooded man and the man with the scar on his face looked at him and listened. The curly-haired man, smiling, said that in this case, the stupid vigilantes would disperse their forces. Pete twisted his face at what he heard and thought that only this curly-haired man was stupid here. Pete turned into a half-box and said that the vigilantes would focus on defense. Pete looked at the blonde man with his arms crossed and said it would be necessary to buy time before Bertram's company came to their rescue. The curly-haired man was interested in what was stopping them then, in order to immediately go to the village. He wants to rob empty houses until help arrives and immediately then leave the village. The curly-haired man frowned and said that he doubted Pete's words, that Bertram's company would arrive before they could leave the village. He believed that only a fool obsessed with robbery would not be able to leave the village in time. The curly-haired man crossed his arms over his chest and shouted loudly to me that they were not fools and they would be able to leave in time. The bandit standing behind him gleefully agreed with his words. Pete covered his face with his hands and lowered his head down. He was indignant and thought that he did not understand why he was surrounded by such fools. The curly-haired man calculated everything in his head and said that while Bertram's company was sending reinforcements, they would already have time to leave the village with the loot. Pete introduced the empty houses of the people from the village and said that if the village was evacuated, then there would be no money or supplies left in their houses. It would be a waste of time and they would be left with nothing. The curly-haired man turned to the hooded man and asked if it wouldn't be easier to just attack the caravan of Bertram's company. The hooded man was picking his nose and listening to the bandits' reasoning. Pete closed his eyes and an idea struck him. Pete started gesturing with his hands and said that if they attacked Bertram's company, they would come face to face with them, which they should avoid in the first place, since they are much stronger than ordinary vigilantes. The curly-haired man stood in front of Pete and said that in this case, you cannot go to the ram, they can suddenly go on the attack. Pete clenched his teeth, his lips twitched. Then Pete broke into a smile and joined his hands. He said that they all think the same way. The curly-haired man was embarrassed and agreed with Pete. Pete drove past the curly-haired man. He began to address the rest of the bandits, which suggests that the company will leave some of its forces in the south and some sent to the center of the village as guerrillas. The bandits listened attentively to Pete. Pete was explaining the attack plan to the others. He presented the painted men. In the north, the bandits attacked the vigilantes. In the south, there was Bertram's company, and the man in the center, the partisans from the company, went north to help the vigilantes. Pete smiled and held up one finger. He said that when they got rid of the vigilantes, the villagers would lose faith in salvation, and they would only have to deal with Bertram's company. Pete started walking around and saying that before the knights could come to help the vigilantes, they would be able to catch Bertram's company by surprise and rob them. The bandits represented the wagons with wealth left unguarded. Two bandits discussed that if they attacked Bertram's company, the residents would have time to escape and hide. The second replied that most likely the residents would start hiding in the wagons. The bandits continued to talk and agreed with the plan of action. A blonde-haired man looked at them and said that the attack on the vigilantes was a fake plan, and Pete intended to tell them about it. Pete raised his hands up, his face lit up with happiness, and he said that the blonde man was right. Hearing Pete's words, the bandits were alarmed. They looked at Pete angrily. Pete's face changed, it took on a sinister smile, and he said that now he would tell the real plan that they would stick to. The bandits were scared. The blonde man grinned. They were waiting for Pete's plan. At the same time, a fist thumped on the table in one of the houses of the village. An elderly man was shouting furiously, and the two men were scared when they heard it. An elderly man got up from behind a chair and spoke menacingly. He was surrounded by people. The events took place in the village headman's house. There was a meeting on the topic of bandits. The latter were hiding among the adventurers and their main group. A man was rearranging knights in helmets with spears. Two issues were discussed at the meeting. The first, what to do with the information received about the bandits, and the second, how to secure the village until reinforcements in the form of knights arrive. Also about the information that the bandits received, the elderly man reasoned that the information leak occurred near the village of Tayakura. Most likely the bandits used the same tactics against them. Daichi was thinking about it. Daichi, Alicia, Frida, and Denny's were sitting at a table. Nick the cat was sitting on it, and there were mugs with a jug. Daichi put his hands on the table and lay down on them. Daichi's head was in his arms, and he said that they would agree to their plan, which they came up with at the general meeting. He presented a diagram with a high wall surrounding the village, and exits were only from the north and south. The north was guarded by vigilantes and adventurers, the south by the company. Daichi introduced the little men and said that they would be able to repel any attack. They would send part of the company to the center of the village, the guerrillas. With a detachment in the center, they would be able to help both the south and the north, and even notice the penetration of bandits through the walls. Daichi continued that they are evacuating civilians who live in the north and south to minimize possible damage. People will be hidden in shelters. Daichi plans to propose this plan to Bertram's company. Daichi recalled the stern face of the elderly man, and the bandits who disguise themselves as adventurers will stand guard with the vigilantes at the north gate. Denny's raised his hand and said that Daichi was not afraid of the failure of the plan, as a result of which they would be left with nothing. Daichi looked at Denny's and thought that this was a wise way of looking at the situation. Frida closed one eye and said that the villagers would not be able to come up with anything better than their plan. And also, if they came up with a plan, they did not have time to implement it. In any case, they would have to agree with the guy's plan. Daichi opened his mouth slightly. He was surprised by such a frank story from Frida. Daichi and Alicia heard something and looked away. Frida said she thought it was time for them to go. Denny's got up from his chair. His hands were on the table. He shifted to visit the head. The brick corridors were illuminated by light coming through the windows. The guys met Karina, the head, and another man in one of the corridors. The head replied threateningly that it was necessary to act according to the plan. The plan was for Daichi, Alicia, Karina, Denny's, and Frida to stay with Santa Claus at the south gate and prepare for an attack by bandits. The rest of the escort squad will be stationed in the center of the village with Captain Jeffrey, a dark-haired man with several scars on his face. They will have to help any party that needs help at any time. They gave the order to prepare to fight back immediately, and the guys agreed to do so. Soldiers were running around the camp with tents and wagons. One tent, which was different from all the others, stood to the side. Daichi was sitting in the tent with a plastic water bottle and a gun in his hands. He thought he didn't know how strong the bandits' magic armor was, but it was worth considering that his weapon wouldn't cause fatal damage to the bandits. There were various firearms lying next to Daichi. He was wondering what caliber of weapon he needed to take with him. Daichi thought about it and imagined himself in military uniform with weapons in both hands. He thought that he still wouldn't understand exactly which of the bandits was a level B magician, and therefore it would be a mistake if he shot at everyone in a row. Daichi opened his laptop and turned on a video on how to shoot correctly. He was thinking that he could attack everyone indiscriminately at first, and who would stay, just finish them off later, or still put everyone to sleep with gas. Daichi is distracted by the cat who brought him something. Daichi takes a bundle. Several weapons of different types are lying next to it. Daichi assumed that the cat wanted to play with him, so he brought him a bundle. At that moment, voices were heard behind him, which came from a walkie-talkie lying on the table. Daichi was surprised by the noise. Someone said on the other side of the radio that the plan was fake. Daichi turned towards the table and the walkie-talkie. The walkie-talkie continued to say that their real target was Bertram's company. Daichi continued to look at the radio, and he grinned at what he heard and apologized to the cat and said that he would play with him a little later. The cat sat and looked at Daichi, who had turned away from him. Daichi was standing in front of a table with a walkie-talkie on it. Sweat was running down his face. He was scared to hear that the plan turned out to be fake. The cat stood next to him and looked towards the table. Voices continued to come from the radio that the vigilantes were an easy target, and they would really act differently. Pete said with a cheerful smile that their real goal was Bertram's company. They will still have time to attack the village, and the chance to attack the caravan of Bertram's company may not always appear. They should not miss this chance. The blonde man said that their true purpose was the cargo of the caravan. Pete said that the cargo is also very important, but he wants to capture their head. One of the bandits asked that someone had seen what the head of Bertram looked like. Pete pointed at the dark-haired man, Joseph, and said that he and Joseph knew what the head looked like. Pete presented the painted men and told the bandits the plan, that they would send their man, who would specifically lose the letter with their plan of action, and the adventurer at the North Gate would find him and find out the plan. The men raged and began to discuss that, upon learning about the letter, the company would transfer its troops immediately to the vigilantes. Another man said that most likely the company would simply increase the number of people in the center of the village. Pete was beaming with happiness. Pete thought that they would most likely move their forces to the center and leave the main henchmen next to them. Pete raised his hand up and said that those who stay next to the head will be strong fighters who will be able to defeat any enemy. The curly-haired man got angry and started pointing his finger at Pete. He said that Pete himself had said how strong Bertram's guards were, and now he was suggesting that the bandits attack them and fight them. Pete smiled and closed one eye. He said that if he and the three men who stand behind him do this, they will definitely win. Pete added that they could handle it if they had a blonde male boss with them. The man in the hood said that they had not had strong rivals for a long time, and Joseph needed to be careful not to burn them down. The men started swearing and threatening each other. They were asked to calm down. A few bandits stood aside and rejoiced at this plan. They were determined to win. The faces of the 5 bandits turned into evil grins. They were not like the rest of the bandits, because each of them is a real soldier. Pete held up his finger, squinted, and added that they needed to use them to be more confident. The other bandits looked in the same direction at the same time. They were looking into the depths of the gorge from which the terrible sounds were coming. It was too dark to see anything. Some of the bandits were looking into the darkness and were scared. One of the bandits said that they decided to use their trump card so that they would not regret their defeat in the future. The head of the bandits stretched out his hand and shouted that everything was decided. Ulian and his men would be informed that they would attack the North Gate tomorrow night. He instructed me to write and send a fake letter. The bandits began to move and began to disperse around the cave. The head of the bandits continued to say that it was necessary to write a letter with the smallest details. He shouted that the attack would begin tomorrow night. Daichi was squatting on his haunches, holding his chin in his hand and thoughtfully listening to the conversations from the radio. The bandit said that, as Pete had said they would launch an attack that night, the bandits were in a hurry to gather. Someone asked Daichi if he could come into Daichi's tent. Daichi is startled by surprise. It was Karina. She said that Captain Jeffrey had intercepted information about the bandits' plan, and the head wanted to discuss it with Daichi as soon as possible. Daichi replies that he will be coming soon. Daichi puts his phone in his pocket. The head's tent, a torch was burning next to it. The bandit's letter was lying in the tent. The head raised his hand in front of him and said that the bandits were going to attack tonight. Daichi and the rest of the guys looked at the head and listened to him. The head showed the letter and said that the patrolmen had detained a suspicious adventurer, with whom they found a letter addressed to bandits who had entered the village. The head, with a serious face, said that most likely the bandits realized that they had placed a detachment of partisans in the center of the village. The head's face frowned even more. He said that the bandits' goal is to kill the vigilantes. They intend to do this quickly and thereby capture the northern gate. There were painted men who clearly showed the bandits' plan of action. The head said that they would be the next target. The bandits would not be able to defeat everyone together. They intended to deal with each one individually. Denny said that this was the plan of the real bandits. Frida said that this plan was bound to fail if they didn't have a good leader, such as in the army or in the knightly order. Daichi watched the boys' conversation thoughtfully. The guys were standing around the table where the head was sitting. Denny's asked the head why he had gathered them in this place. The head of state slammed his hand on the table. The head shouted that he did not intend the bandits to do whatever they wanted. The partisan detachment had already been notified and was heading to the vigilantes. He wanted the guys to go to the North Gate to help. The guys listened to the chapter with fascination. Denny's pressed his hand to his chest and said that he would carry out the order, but he was interested in the question of what the head would do at that moment. The head replied that he intended to stay with the merchants. Karina said she wanted to stay with the head. The head leaned back in his chair and crossed his fingers. He said that the company's employees would protect him. The guys had nothing to worry about. Denny's turned to the head and said that it would be easier for the guys to fight if they knew that everything was fine with the head. Frida said that the head needed to accept the offer of protection from Karina. The head started waving his hand and said that there were 5-level mages in the bandit team. Karina's absence could have a bad effect on the outcome of the battle. Daichi remembered the bandits' negotiations on the radio. He understood what the bandits' plan was. Daichi suddenly rushed to the head and started shouting that before making a decision. The head needs to listen to him. The head asked if this conversation was urgent or not. Daichi said that this conversation was very urgent and they should not leave the south gate unguarded. The head was angry. He did not understand how Daichi's words could affect his decision. Daichi puts a gadget on the table in front of the head and says that if the head listens, he will immediately understand that everything that the bandits came up with turned out to be a hoax. The head looks at Daichi and the object he placed on the table in surprise. The gadget started making sounds. A voice from there said that it was necessary to specifically give incorrect information about the attack. Another voice asked if it was necessary to lure Bertram's company directly into a trap. The guys were shocked by what they heard. The head hovered over the device that was making voices. There they talked about the plan and the implementation of this plan. The head did not believe that he had heard a human voice from this device. Frida covered her mouth with her hand in surprise. Denny's did not take his eyes off the table. Karina was holding her head and Alicia was smiling cheerfully. Daichi picked up the device and said that this was the bandit's true plan. The head opened his mouth slightly and asked what kind of tool Daichi had brought. The head changed his mind and said that this information was not important now. He did not understand how this conversation came from the device and how Daichi got it. Daichi says that when they were in the forest, behind the bandits south of the village about a kilometer from this place, they left their device there. The head was shocked by what he heard. Daichi continued to say that this conversation had taken place recently. There was a loud shout that someone was coming, and everyone, startled, turned sharply in the direction from which the scream came. A soldier runs into the tent of the head, where the head himself and the guys were, and says that the northern gate is attacked. There is a battle going on. The guys turned towards the soldier. He continued to shout that they had launched a signal into the sky. The head abruptly gets up from his chair. Daichi looked at him. The head leaned his hands on the table and wondered how to proceed. Daichi raised one hand up. He closed his eyes and lowered his head down. He said he had a plan. Daichi points to one of the objects on the map. He says that they are using the bandits' strategy against them. Daichi made a serious face and said that everything was really very simple. Daichi vividly presented his plan in the form of figures drawn by a man. He said that the bandits would come from the south. The guys would outflank them and set up a trap on the way between the southern forest and the gate. Daichi pointed at the map. The guys closely followed his actions. He told them that everything would work out. The bandits should believe that everything was going according to their plan. Daichi continued to speak and introduce the little men. He said that the guys needed to make the bandits believe that all the southern forces were redirected to the northern gate. Daichi went on to say that he, Karina, Frid, Denny's, and Alicia would actually stay with the caravan. Masked civilians will go north instead. Then the head will stand on the square, creating the appearance that he alone is engaged in guarding the gate. He will become a bait for bandits. Then the guys will bypass the bandits from the other side. Then suddenly the guys will attack the unexpected bandits. Daichi cheerfully said that even if their surprise attack didn't work, they would be able to buy enough time for Head Klaus to get to the center of the village. Karina got angry and slapped the table with her hand, saying that it was very dangerous. Daichi calmly replied that the bandits would attack them soon. There was no time to talk about the risk. Kaina said that the bandits were heading for the south gate. She suggested just bringing everyone back. Denny's crossed his arms and said it wouldn't work. Frida thoughtfully put her hand to her chin and said that the bandits would arrive before help. The guys thought they could meet the bandits in the center of the village, so they could buy time before the squad arrived from the north. Karina said if the vigilantes stay at the north gate, the company's forces will be great and they will be able to defeat everyone. Karina raised two hands in the air and happily asked that she was right, wasn't she? Denny's opened his mouth and said that if they only had to worry about the fight, then Karina would be right. Frida was standing next to Denny's and they were looking at Karina. Head Klaus frowned and listened to the guys. Frida said that, in her opinion, the head would not approve of Karina's plan. Daichi closed his eyes, lowered his head and crossed his arms. He said that if they could gather all the bandits in the center of the village, but the true purpose of the bandits is to kidnap the head of Klaus. Karina was surprised, and Daichi reminded her about the non-evacuated civilians from the south. The atmosphere around Karina has changed. She has become depressed. Karina stood with clenched fists and lowered her head. Daichi turned around and looked at Karina. The guys stood in front of the head of Klaus. He wondered what the probability was that they would be able to defeat the bandits. Daichi broke the silence and said that he had a secret weapon. The head of the clan looked menacingly at the guys. His fingers were clasped and were in front of his face. He said that Daichi's special weapon was capable of defeating 60 bandits, including 5 magicians of rank. The head wondered if Daichi was proficient in mass destruction magic, or if he was proficient in a magic tool with similar functions. Daichi thought about it, his lips tightened, and he said that he could get the bandits out of standing without killing them. The guys who surrounded him were shocked by what they heard. Dedicated Klaus did not understand how this was possible. Karina hit the table with her fist. She started pointing her finger at Daichi and shouting angrily that Daichi was not up to bandits. Daichi needed to stop being so frivolous. Deniz's hand appears in front of Karina. He tries to hold it back. Deniz pushes Karina back and stands in front of her. Karina does not understand what is happening. Deniz began to say that no one could just believe that Daichi would be able to deal with the 60s bandits. Deniz frowned and said that it sounded even more incredible that the bandits would stay alive after that. The head held out his finger and said that he agreed with Deniz. He wanted to find out how Daichi was going to pull off his plan. The head was waiting for an explanation from Daichi. Daichi reached into his bag and said that he didn't really want to show the secret weapon ahead of time. Daichi took an item out of his bag. His hand came close to his face, and he said that it would not work without it, so he would explain everything to them now. Daichi showed a secret weapon. There was no one around the headscarf. There were several torches and another handkerchief nearby. The village was quiet. A river flowed behind a stone fence. There was a bridge on it and a house next to it. Then there were only fields. Daichi and the rest of the guys were standing outside and waiting. Daichi looked at Alicia. By the decision of the head, she was suspended from the upcoming operation. But Alicia objected to the decision of the head and said that, in her opinion, it would be more practical to use attacking magic outside the village. The head of Klaus then retreated from his words. Daichi looked to the side and thought that, in his opinion, Alicia's specialty was ranged spells. Karina told Daichi that he was absolutely sure that the plan would go smoothly. Daichi turned his head to Karina. Daichi turned around and said that he had not been able to convince them completely. But if the head decided that his plan was too dangerous, the guys could leave Daichi and he would finish everything himself. In case the plan fails, Daichi will launch a massive rifle attack. Alicia appears behind Daichi. She scared him. Alicia smiled and seemed that in case of failure, she would help him and would also fire magic. The street was quiet. Only Karina's screams could be heard. She said that she would not allow them to be left alone together. Daichi replied that, but if he wasn't here, they wouldn't be able to complete the second part of the plan. Karina held out her hand in front of her and said that she would be with them until the very end, even if the second stage of the plan failed. Karina frowned and said that they would all leave together, even if she had to carry the guys on her. She abruptly turned away. Daichi nervously scratched his face with his hand, and with a smile on his face, said that Karina should not worry so much. Deniz put his hand to his face and said that he had heard about Daichi's talents, but he did not understand how Daichi remained so self-confident. Frida said with a smile on her face that no matter how strong or weak the enemy is, you should never let your guard down. Karina said with displeasure that she thinks Daichi is a high-class magician, but he doesn't have any combat experience. Daichi was surprised. Kaina touched Daichi's chest with her finger and said that there had been cases where a talented magician had died at the hands of a minor bandit because he lacked experience, and these magicians had one thing in common. Karina twisted her face and said that all these magicians were overconfident. Daichi looked at her in surprise. He thought it was tough. Daichi brought his fist close to his face and coughed. Then he closed his eyes and said that there was a saying in his homeland, if you know yourself and your enemy, then you don't have to worry about the results in hundreds of battles. Karina made a surprised face. She did not understand what this saying meant. Alicia stood behind Karina and smiled. Daichi turned away from Karina and said that if you know your capabilities and the capabilities of your enemy, then even in hundreds of battles, victory will be yours. That's what this saying means. Alicia admired Daichi's erudition. Karina stood behind and said that she understood the general meaning of the saying. Daichi raised his hand up and said that they know the enemy's plan and this is their main advantage. They used their plan against them. Karina objected. She said that she understood him, but he was still careless. The guys were talking. Daichi spread his hands to the side and thought that the guys did not believe him. It seemed to him that in their eyes a naive boy. He said he might not have any experience, but he had enough knowledge. Daichi reflected that he had read a lot of different literature, including historical literature, and his knowledge of military strategy was much more extensive than that of an ordinary student. Daichi kept thinking that this was his first fight, but he wasn't afraid of it. He's excited about putting his knowledge to the test. Daichi was serious. He reflected that he was capable of thinking sensibly. Alicia said, startled, that they had come. Alicia screamed that the bandits were a kilometer away from them. Karina drew her sword and shouted that everyone needed to get ready. Alicia needed to put physical reinforcement and protection on her. Daichi tensed up and thought that a kilometer away. They can only wait for the bandits to get closer. Alicia notices something. Alicia shouts to the guys who rushed into battle that in addition to the bandits there are 6 royal monkeys. Bandits with monsters rushed towards the guys. Daichi grinned. The other guys were shocked by this turn of events. Karina and Daichi turned around and rushed towards Alicia. The guys approached Alicia closely. They were interested in who controls the monkeys and discovered they were moving. Daichi recalled that someone controls the royal monkeys, as these monsters are used in battles. Karina pointed towards the forest and said that there were 66 bandits in total, and among them 6 royal monkeys. Karina looked towards the forest and said that everything was bad. Denny's anxiously shouted that there were more bandits than they expected and 6 more monkeys with them. Frida said they needed to retreat. Karina tensed up. Alicia shouted that the bandits had accelerated, and Karina was standing nearby. Daichi, surrounded by magical sparks, declared that he would stay to detain them, instructing the others to inform the head. He was sure that his plan did not depend on the number of opponents. Karina turned to Daichi. She was furious and exclaimed that he wasn't talking nonsense. Daichi broke into a smile and said that the number of bandits did not affect the implementation of his plan. He needed to increase the number of shells. Karina opened her mouth in shock and looked at Daichi. Alicia said she would stay with Daichi. Karina and Daichi stared at her with their mouths open. Alicia said that her attacking magic would be useless in the village. Alicia started to smile and said that with body-strengthening magic, she could easily keep up with Daichi. Karina objected that she was the head of the squad and everyone should follow her. Alicia interrupted her and said that the bandits were 700 meters away. Karina jerked in fright. Denny said that they would not budge at this rate. Karina and Frida were standing next to him. Karina clenched her fists in anger. Karina shouted that she was staying with the boys and Frida and Daichi should also stay to help them. Frieda took out her sword and Denny said they were relying on Daichi. Daichi looked at the guys, a smile appeared on his face and he raised his thumbs up. There was still no one in sight on the road leading to the forest. Alicia reported that the bandits were already 600 meters away. The guys took up combat positions, preparing for the attack. Alicia raised her hand up and Daichi, noticing this, decided that this was a signal. The distance was reduced to 500 meters. All the guys were looking at Alicia's hand. Alicia curled up one finger, leaving 4 fingers. Daichi stroked the cat that was peeking out of his bosom. There were 3 uncurled fingers on Alicia's hand. Then there were 2 uncurled fingers. Bandits could already be seen in the field approaching the guys. As they approached, the bandits' faces could already be seen. Daichi gritted his teeth and thought that with 200 meters left, he could already see their faces. He wondered if he would be able to get a weapon in time if the decontamination plan didn't work. There was only 1 uncurled finger left on Alicia's hand. The bandits were in range. Each of the guys closed their eyes and covered their ears with their hands. Daichi stretched his arms out and activated his power. Grenades rained down from the sky. The bandits all looked at the grenades that were falling on them at once. They were surprised by what they saw. Stun grenades rained down from the sky. They stun the enemy for a while. A bright flash illuminates the bandits. Pete, the curly-haired man, the rest of the bandits fall under the action of this grenade. They are illuminated by the brightest flash of light. Daichi turned away from the flash. His eyes and ears were closed. After the explosion, he opened his eyes a crack and then stood up to see if the plan had worked or not. The bandits were holding their eyes. They were disoriented. Some of them were standing motionless, some were lying on the ground. They were trying to come to their senses. The royal monkeys were lying on the ground. Daichi looked at the bandits and began to smile. Karina stood with her eyes and ears covered. Daichi touched her back and showed her that she could already look around. Balls and spinning lights descended into the sky. The bandits were lying on the ground. Denny's looked at what was happening in fright. He did not understand what had happened. Frida looked towards the field and wondered if the bandits were lying there. Karina glared at Daichi and asked him who he was. Daichi looked at Karina and stood motionless. Daichi spread his arms and said it was time to capture the bandits. Daichi and the guys headed in the direction where the bandits are huddled. Karina followed Daichi and stared at him intently. Daichi thought that the guys still needed time to get used to what was happening. Daichi was presenting his equipment and thought that he needed to somehow limit the bandits' foresight. He needed to use the network. Daichi started using magic and said he would have to be safe.